Helmet is a haven where 5 demon kings rule. The dark platoons are dark and ominous. There is magic in the air, foreshadowing a grand battle with the forces of evil. Arthur and 4 allies set out for the demon harbor of Helmet for the decisive battle. Their goal is to defeat all 5 demon kings who sow chaos and fear. Great Arthur enters the battle. One swing of the sword and the monster's attack is stopped. This is the power of Arthur's sword. The witch directs the magic staff to destroy the enemies. There is a smile on her face, and the excitement of the battle is burning in her eyes. This is the magical power of wise Sandy. The nun floats in the air, emitting a golden glow, blessing her allies. A blow from the shadows, but she blocks it blindly, as if she could feel the air itself. Reliable Annie. Silence and light are the weapons of her faith. A huge strongman with an axe rushes into battle. One blow and the enemy flies away. His name is Tomi. He is brave and knows no fear. Harry races forward. He's the first one. Passion in his eyes, sword in hand. Arthur is the target to overtake. Only he can be the best. Tight Harry in action! His strength is like a battering ram, fast, powerful, merciless. Arthur didn't notice it. For him, Harry was just an ally in battle. Harry looks at Arthur. Envy and the desire to catch up are read in every glance. Every step is a challenge to the darkness that is gathered in this cursed place. The warriors clutch their weapons, preparing to fight the remaining demons. A sudden blow, a giant tentacle pierces Harry's chest. Blood, shock, fall. The monster's eerie laughter echoes around, mocking the fallen and wounded. Arthur rushes into battle, without fear or doubt, only determination and strength. Arthur defeats the monster with one powerful blow. The battle is over. The team is tense. A wounded friend strikes terror into their hearts. Grief in the eyes. Harry dies, and the world becomes quieter with loss. He gives his life for Arthur, too high a price to pay. Harry leaves, remaining true to himself and his honor until the end. In his heart, regret and the will to destroy all the demon kings. Arthur vows to destroy all kings, leaving no chance for his enemies. A slight smile of calm appears on Harry's face. Saying goodbye to his friends, he asks the nun Yenny to pray for him. Tomi calls him the bravest warrior, words that touch the heart. Almost confesses his love to the witch Sandy. But suddenly the phrase is interrupted and the scene changes. We are transported to another world where a blonde, small Harry is stomping on a book in a rage. He is unhappy and angry with everyone. In the book, everyone is great and brave, but he is weak and dull. His comrades, Arthur, Sandy, Yenny, and Tommy, after his death, allowed such a story to be told, did not protect him. Now he is reborn and remembers everything that happened 300 years ago. Harry looks at the painting on the wall. It depicts Arthur, the legendary warrior. Now he is James Lionheart, 13 years old, and he is a descendant of the great Arthur. During his lifetime, Arthur had, in addition to his wife, several more concubines. He was not a womanizer, but over the years his interest in them awakened. Only children in the direct line from his wife are considered official heirs. James Lionheart bears the family name but is not recognized as the direct heir. Children of the sidelines are not allowed to use swords and do magic training before the blood rite. That's why he has a wooden sword. But this will be the last day that his sword is not real. James slashes the wooden dummy with his practice sword, causing it to break in half and fall to the ground. The father freezes, looking at the result in complete shock. James looks calmly at his father. The father is worried about the thought. He is only 13, but in a fight he would probably lose. The father looks at his son with concern. The strength and coldness in his gaze are frightening. He is only a child, but he speaks and moves like an adult. There is not a drop of childish naivety in James's fierce eyes. His mother died early, but he shows no sadness or melancholy. James coldly evaluates his result. He looks contemptuously at the blacksmith's work, threatening to teach him a lesson. Father is tense. His gaze asks for restraint. Tomorrow is the blood rite. There is tension and foreboding in the air. The blood rite is an ancient tradition of the Lionheart clan, held once every 10 years. Children from 10 to 15 years of age from all lines gather in the main house. Through competitions, they determine who is worthy of bearing the name Lionheart. Direct heirs are allowed to train with swords and magic. The rest are forbidden sharp blades and magic until the ritual. In this way, the family restrains the lateral branches, preventing them from becoming stronger. One thought worries the father. If James had been born in a direct line, or vice versa, he would have been ordinary like him. James notices the oddity, but his father looks away, warning him that competing with the children of the main family is death. They had everything: weapons, magic, training, since childhood. He couldn't resist them, no matter how hard he tried. James reassures his father by refusing to fight, but in his mind he is confident in every move, the upcoming fight. His thoughts were only about one thing. His opponents, these three, were from the main family, the son of his wife and the twins from the concubine. From the lateral lines, 5. One from a strong branch, the rest are weak. James raises his sword. A blow, and the effigy splits in half. Soon he will see what the descendants of the great Arthur are capable of. Castle. The carriage drives away. James sets out on his journey. In his past life, it seemed that James had a gift from above. Everything came easy. Since childhood, he was the fastest to master knowledge and develop abilities. But then everything changed. He realized what real talent is. A legendary warrior who wields both sword and magic, the great Arthur. He held the title of Duke. Later, he renounced the title. But even after that, he was honored as the greatest warrior, until his death. And Sandy, bold and wise, went to Aros, the kingdom of magicians. There she became the youngest head of the magic tower. Annie, that rotten girl, is now a saint in the Juris Empire. She is revered as a living goddess. Her teachings are recorded in the Holy Scriptures. Tomi, the same brave fool, became king. Incredibly, he founded his own kingdom. Everything worked out well for them all. They enjoyed a life of luxury until their deaths. But Harry remained in the shadow of their legends. Arthur made a promise and broke it. He made peace with the Demon King. His friend died in the ruins. He chose peace. Lord Godden, his traveling companion, warns him about the not-so-sweet life in the main family's house. The carriage rolls slowly along the well-kept path. The spacious lands stretch to the horizon. There are magical portals here, but they remain inaccessible. The carriage is his only transport for now. The stone gates swing open for the arrival of the Lord. The estate of the main family shines in its grandeur. On the horizon, a castle rises, majestic and eerily silent. This estate will be his alone. No one greets him. Only an old cleaner sweeps the square alone. There will be no welcoming ceremony, he thinks, standing in the middle of nowhere. Flags flutter in the sky, each bearing a golden lion, the symbol of ancient blood. The lion on the flag is a sign of Arthur's heritage. Only direct descendants wear the lion on their chest, on the left above the heart, as a sign of fate. Mr. James arrived first and was shown to his chambers. A new day has arrived. The castle sparkles in the sun, the beginning of a new stay at the estate. The sweet maid Nina introduced herself and promised to help Mr. James. To call the service, Nina showed a small golden bell, a sign of care. Arthur noted that Nina looked young. She was only 16 and had recently completed her studies. Because of Nina's inexperience, she was sent to him. She will make many mistakes. The rest of the relatives are expected to arrive within 4 days, and a large gathering is expected. James decided to consolidate his strength on the training ground. The pure-blood children are discussing James. They say he is from a remote village on the western outskirts of the empire. They joke that James is better with a pitchfork than a wooden sword. They won't accept a newcomer. The guys discuss the newcomer, criticizing him for the stench and the risk of dirtying everything around him. They decide to give a warning not to scold and go with Sabrina to talk. The curious eyes of a boy are watching them from the window. She notices the surveillance, turning, her eyes draining of a radiance that is terrifying. She looks straight into his eyes. The boy's spy sees this and gets scared. Sabrina smiles at the boy's cowardice. It amuses her greatly. Meanwhile, in the yard, James is skillfully training with a wooden spear. His spear cuts through the air like a sharp knife through butter. He remembers his past life and how he trained. He was never lazy and practiced every blow. James never took a break from training. He never got worse. His wounds healed quickly. His body is stronger than before. By swinging the spear, the powers grow. The body of Arthur's descendant gives incredible possibilities. Reincarnation in this body allows my physical abilities to grow to an unprecedented level. The maid watched James's training in amazement, marveling at his movements with a spear to which sandbags were tied. She raised her hands to her face in amazement as she watched James expertly practice with his hands wrapped in sandbags. Although it was not a small load, his movements remained fast and precise. Mr. Cyan and Mrs. Seal, the legitimate children of the family, approached the maid and asked what James was doing here. The appearance of the brother and sister frightened the maid so much that she froze, afraid to answer the unexpected and tense question. James lowers his spear to the ground and rudely says that he is training, calling his brother a fool. The sister laughs at her brother, who demands an apology from James for insulting him. James apologizes, but not sincerely. He thinks that friends do not bow their heads to each other. After all, they are the same age. The legitimate brother is angry and demands respect, but James is confident of the equality between them. James sees in front of him just a boy who is threatening with a fist. Cian states that he is not like his brother, despite sharing a surname expressing contempt. Sister reminds brother about the carriage. Cian orders James to wash it. James turns emotionlessly to the maid, asking her to wash his carriage. The brother is furious. He is shocked that the order was ignored and passed on to the maid. James calmly states his last name, Leinhard, reminding them that they are of the same blood. Ciel introduces herself sweetly, watching what is happening with interest. She is clearly enjoying all of this. Cian is seething with rage. He feels humiliated and challenges James to a duel. James calmly suggests not to provoke. He asks to simply leave without causing problems. Ciel mockingly accuses him of cowardice, demonstratively fixing his hair. He demands submission and an apology. James refuses to obey. He does not consider it necessary to fight. Ciel accuses his brother of lacking honor and dignity. James throws the sandbags off his wrists and they hit the ground with a dull thud. The brother and sister are shocked. The bags turned out to be real and heavy, not just for show. James unties the last spear bag, showing confidence. Cian understands that retreat would now be a disgrace, decides to fight. The sister is delighted. What is happening captivates her more and more. For Cian, it's a matter of honor. He must teach James a lesson right now. Cian throws a red handkerchief, an official challenge to a duel. James accepts the challenge calmly, looking confidently at his opponent. The sister watches what is happening with interest. James strikes with his spear in a flash, hitting Cian in the chest. Cian falls back several meters. James calmly declares his victory, not hiding his confidence. The sister rushes to her wounded brother, full of anxiety. Cian, unable to cope with the pain and shock from the blow, begins to vomit right on the ground, bent over in humiliation. She accuses James of dishonesty and breaking the rules of the duel. James denies magic, claiming that everything is just strength and training. She doesn't believe it. Without magic, a spear with such heavy bags cannot be lifted, and the speed of the blow is too great. James, Cian states, although not strong enough to be a descendant of Arthur, has still shown skill worthy of development. At the moment of the attack, the brother instinctively jumped back, thereby reducing the force of the blow, a good reaction for an inexperienced fighter. Cian, humiliated and covered in vomit, complains about the unfair duel, blaming James. James is reminded that members of the direct Lanehart line must accept defeat with dignity. Meanwhile, Heather approaches them, a stern knight without a lion emblem, but who received a title from the main family. Cian, in tears and despair, throws herself into his arms and complains about her defeat at the hands of the redneck. Lord Heather approaches James, asking about the duel and introducing himself as the one responsible for Cian's upbringing. James, in turn, calls himself Leinhard of Gedol, the place where the family of his father, Lord Jihad, lives. Lord Heather wonders what happened. James accuses Cian of bullying and insulting his father. He dared to call him a coward and challenge his honor. Heather believes that holding a duel is a reasonable and fair decision. Lord Heather orders that Lord Cian's wounds be examined. The sister waves cheerfully, promising to see him soon, and James responds in kind. James is sitting in the dining room, gobbling up cutlets and chicken legs. Nina arrives. She says that Dean, Hansen, and Juiz will arrive tomorrow, and in the evening through the portal, Gargis and Dejera. The blood ritual will begin soon. James awaits the beginning. James looks up to the sky, ready to challenge the descendants of Arthur. Cian stands in a huge hall in front of his mother, who harshly criticizes her son for losing to a boy from a side branch. The second wife of the main family, Enisilla. She calls Cian over and hits him in the chest with her fan, which he fails to dodge. Cian is in pain, but his mother tells him to stand still. She is surprised that the boy, the son of Mr. Jihad, does not use magic and defeats her son. When questioned by her mother, her sister reports that the duel began with an unexpected, swift spear strike from James, who decided everything with one blow. Cian bows his head in defeat. Mother is furious and slaps him, condemning him for losing, especially in front of the mob. She doesn't understand how she can give in to a boy of her own age who doesn't even know magic. Mother is beside herself with anger. She will burn with shame at the blood ritual. How will her son be able to look his father in the eyes after such a disgrace? She foresees Tionus's mockery. Cian, in fear, begs for forgiveness. She orders the knight to intensify his training so that Cian does not disgrace himself again. Mother orders Tessa to take the crying Cian out of the hall. Waving her fan in the air, the mother addresses her daughter Seal, urging her to get closer to James. The mother admits that he is stronger than her son, and that she would like to kill him, but is afraid of becoming the main suspect. When tension begins in the family, the defenders of traditions are ready to intervene, but they have no need for it. Their appearance should be avoided, so paying attention to James won't hurt. The next day, 3 children from the side branches come to the main family. Dean, 11 years old, Hansen, 14 years old, Jews, 10 years old. James, running with sandbags on his ankles during training, notices Nina. She reports that 2 of the side branches have arrived. It's a bit early since they were expected in the evening. The head of the Lanehart family arrived with them. Nina advises him to change his clothes first, but James decides to go and greet the guests as he is, afraid of being late. On both sides of the gates there are rows of soldiers in ceremonial dress, greeting important guests. James looks at the crowd. Next to Cian and Ciela, their mother Ancilla is the second wife of the head of the family, and in front of her is the first wife of Tionus, who apparently occupies a special position. The young man standing next to him is the eldest son of the main family and first in line to the title, Jod Leinhord. The guests arrive in 2 luxurious carriages. 2 horsemen can be seen next to them, Gleint Leinhord and his younger brother Kion, who follows closely behind. The atmosphere is solemn and tense because those who have arrived are representatives of the lateral branches of the family, and their appearance is connected with upcoming events that may affect the fate of the Leinhord house. Gleint noticed that Jod had grown noticeably, and his strength had noticeably increased. The father patted his son's head affectionately, assessing the changes. The father's gaze turned to his second wife and children, who had also changed greatly. Cian and Ciela have grown up and changed noticeably. Time does not stand still. All the children expressed their longing for their father in unison, showing strong family ties. The head of the family apologized for his absence at the time of the birth of Guildfard's brother's son, showing sincere regret. Having assessed all the children from the side branches with a glance, he invited them to eat together and discuss the upcoming blood ritual, an important event for the family that requires joint participation and preparation. Everyone sat down in the dining room at the festive table. Sitting opposite each other, they carefully looked at those around them. Faces were familiar and new. The tension in the air was felt in everything. Every glance seemed to be searching for allies and enemies, and behind the festive feast were hidden complex intrigues and expectations of the upcoming ceremony. Gargus and Digera arrived with the head of the family, using the portal to attend the ceremony. Their families were considered among the most noble among the collateral branches of the Leinharts. Suddenly the question arose, who is this new guest? After all, only the participants of the ceremony should be present at the dinner. Ciel asked her father who he was. Her father thought about it, but then decided to introduce the guest. This is Roberian of the Red Tower of Tros, the leader of the famous Red Magic Tower of Iros. This surprised everyone present. James felt sick at this news. Roberian noticed it and asked if he was okay. The head of the Red Magic Tower turned out to be the disciple of the disciple of the disciple of Senya. 300 years ago, Senya became the youngest head of the Green Tower of Aros, updated the magical grimoires and instructed students and tower leaders. And now the head of the Green Tower, Roberian of the Red Tower, revere her as a great teacher and wise mentor. James did not expect to meet a man here who was connected with an old friend. Gleint, addressing James, mentioned Tionus, Cian's mother, who was unhappy with her son's behavior. He first insulted James and his father and then lost the duel. Cian felt fear, realizing that everything had become known. He began to sweat. James calmly confirmed that this was indeed the case, and that he held no grudge against his opponent. He was confident of his victory, because even if he lost, it would not change anything. If he could not defend his honor, he would accept insults. He sees no other way out. Gleint noted that James was stronger than his son, and he was not ashamed of defeat. He was disappointed by his son's cowardly look. The leader reminded his son that he started the fight by insulting James, but after the defeat he didn't even apologize. He emphasized that despite the surname Leinhard and belonging to the descendants of the great Arthur, Cian must respect not only his own honor but also the honor of others. However, Cian's apology sounded insincere, and James immediately noticed this, sensing the falseness in his opponent's words. Gleint admitted that he does not personally know James's father. James confirmed that the family does indeed live in some isolation. He said that his father taught him the basics of wrestling, but he did most of his training on his own. Everyone was shocked to learn that he trained without a mentor and managed to defeat Cian. Now the expectations for the upcoming blood ritual have increased significantly. It promises to be really interesting. It's time to serve food. There were a variety of dishes on the table: chicken legs, baked chicken, cold appetizers, and lobsters with lemon. The head noted that everyone was probably hungry, so he recommended not to be shy and boldly begin eating. Night fell on the house, the table was empty. There were a lot of dirty dishes left around, which the maid tirelessly cleared away. Gleint announced the beginning of the story about the upcoming blood ritual. The attention of those present was maximally concentrated. No one dared to be distracted from the important story. The head of the family, despite her status, openly admitted that she considers the traditional rules of the blood ritual to be unfair. In his opinion, they initially put the participants in an unequal position. The descendants of the direct branch receive an advantage, while children from side families are deprived of access to real weapons and magic until the beginning of the ritual. This naturally reduces their chances of winning to almost zero. He stressed that this year her 3 own children will take part in the ceremony. However, he expressed hope that not only they, but all the present Leinhardts would be able to demonstrate their true abilities. The essence of the ritual is not about which branch you come from, but about who is truly worthy of bearing the name of the descendant of great Arthur. James noted with a smile that Arthur's descendant turned out to be much softer and kinder than his ancestor himself. The head announced that this year the participants of the ritual would be assisted by an outsider. That is why Roberian arrived in person. The head's words caused considerable surprise among all those present. It was a real surprise. Roberian explained that the blood ritual this time will take place in a special format. All participants will be sent into a labyrinth created by him. Everyone will enter through a separate entrance, and from that moment the test will begin. The main goal is to reach the center of the labyrinth and defeat the main monster. However, as the magician emphasized, the path to it will not be easy. Participants will encounter traps, riddles, and enemies. However, everything they see is just an illusion created by his magic. He warned that although the threats are not real, they will feel like they are, so they should be taken seriously. James realized that the labyrinth would not only use summoning magic, but also high-class psionics. This is where the power of the leader of the Red Magic Tower comes into play. Defeating the monster by one of those present meant the end of the test for everyone. Everyone would be awarded points based on their results. If the participant refused to take the test, he was not exposed to any risk, but he could not count on a high grade. The last part aroused the greatest interest. The winner was given the right to choose absolutely any artifact from the treasury of the Leinhardt family. This statement caused a wave of surprise. Even the most calm participants felt how ambition began to awaken. James walked along the quiet, softly lit corridor, the walls of which reflected the reflections of the magical lanterns. One thought was spinning in his head, not about victory that seemed to him already a done deal, but about choice. The underground treasury of the Leinhardt family contained countless gifts, and it was necessary to decide in advance what exactly deserved to become his reward. Silhouettes appeared ahead. Gargis and Dejira stood at the end of the corridor as if guarding the way. They looked at him sternly, intently, without words, with a look that conveyed more than just interest. It was a challenge. James defeated Cian without difficulty, and this fact quickly became known among the participants of the ritual. They demanded confirmation. James answered briefly, and not wanting to continue the conversation, left. Gargis cast a brief, questioning glance at his sister. He was perplexed. Later that night, under the light of the full moon, he walked out into the backyard again. In his hands was a wooden sword, a training weapon. He moved through the air as if he were fighting invisible opponents. The blows were precise, honed. Each attack tore the silence of the night as if cutting it in half. His body movements were harmonious, as if he was dancing to the rhythm of an ancient martial art. Two people were watching him from afar, a brother and sister, children of a side branch, kept their eyes on him. They also had weapons in their hands, wooden spears. They approached slowly, not daring to immediately break this nightly ritual. Gargus suddenly pulled off his shirt and showed off his well-defined, toned muscles. He was tensed as if he were posing for a bodybuilding competition. His musculature was impeccable. James thought he was being stupid and showed no interest. Gargus began to talk about their family's secret technique, a special drug, which accelerates muscle growth without accumulating magical energy and supposedly has no side effects. James responded with irony, and Dejera added that everyone who takes this remedy starts growing a beard. The sister noticed that, despite his victory with the spear, James was now training with a wooden sword. Although his spear was his primary weapon, he was equally skilled with a sword. To prove this, James confidently thrust his wooden sword forward, demonstrating his readiness for battle. Gargus's sister, unlike her brother, aroused his genuine interest. Determination could be seen in her gaze. She suggested sparring. James accepted the challenge without hesitation, mentally noting that it would be interesting to test what the heirs of the noble side branches were capable of. The opponents stood opposite each other, waiting. The situation was tense. The girl's brother stepped forward and pompously declared that he would be the judge, raising his hand as if at a real tournament. His self-confident behavior seemed funny. He couldn't help but think that the guy was somewhat reminiscent of Tommy's descendant. Dillshera insisted that true mastery with a spear comes only to those who have dedicated their entire lives to it. Gargus gave the command and the battle began. James remained absolutely calm from the start of the fight. He was in no hurry to attack, standing with his sword in a low stance, as if watching and waiting for his opponent to open up. The girl, irritated by his passivity, abruptly went on the attack. Her movements were quick and precise. The moment their weapons first crossed, the tension exploded into a series of rapid exchanges of blows. Despite the wooden training blades, each of them struck seriously, as if victory or death was at stake. Without magic, relying only on her body and weapons, she moved with the grace of a predator. James analyzed it coolly. She really was talented. In the future, with magic, ability, and enough persistence, she could become a dangerous fighter. But not now. He stood still, parrying her blows with minimal movements, which only irritated his opponent even more. She decided that she would break through his defense with one powerful maneuver. James blocked the weapon with a flick of his wrist, finding himself with victory in his hands without even using its full power. It was all over. The winner of the fight was James Leinhard. Gargus was persistent. He wanted unification. James didn't understand why he was woken up in the middle of the night. Although the participants were supposed to enter the maze through different entrances, they were supposed to unite inside. Their goal was simple: to defeat the main monster in the center of the labyrinth. Formally, they should act alone. They knew that the twins would also try to act together, and they did not see this as breaking the rules. James, to whom they turned for support, was skeptical. He believed that he was capable of dealing with the monster alone. The twins insisted on their own. Whenever children from both the direct and collateral branches participated in the blood ritual, the latter suffered defeat. It was a long-established tradition, but now they wanted to change history. By joining forces, they hoped not only to survive, but to prove that the descendants of the lateral branches were also worthy of bearing the name Leinhart. It's time to defeat the main family. The second wife stood at the window, gazing out into the garden, bathed in the soft light of the full moon. She thought about the head of the magic tower, a guest whose appearance had disturbed not only the house, but also the balance of power within the family. He was not just a magician. He was the head of the magic tower of Aros, one of the most powerful wizards of our time. It was believed that Roberian came to participate in the blood ritual as an observer, but he may have been looking for a student, and it was Yod who showed interest in magic from early childhood. If Roberian did choose Yoda as his apprentice, it would mean leaving his family. This way, Cian and Seal will be able to move forward without competition from their older brother. But it all came down to the ritual. If one of the participants in the blood ritual could pass the labyrinth before Cian and Seal, especially if it is a child from a lateral branch, the shame will fall not only on him, but on the entire line of direct inheritance. Perhaps if this side branch boy showed himself too brightly, it would at least distract attention from Xian's defeat. 3 days passed. The blood ritual began. All participants lined up in front of the dark mouth of the cave, into which a shimmering portal led. At the top stood the head of the magic tower, holding a shining magic ball in his hands. Streams of light burst out of the ball, dividing into several dozen separate blue spheres. Each of them landed with a soft splash on the participants, in their palms and chests. Roberian explained, "With the help of a magical implant, everyone must imagine in their head the weapon with which they want to enter the labyrinth. The power of thought will transform light into a concrete form a weapon from light." There was a moment of silence, and one by one the participants began to concentrate. Blades flashed from the hands of some, graceful, thin, or massive. Some had spears with rune tips. Some chose a staff, curved and decorated with a crystal. This sword cannot break because it, like the entire labyrinth, is created with the help of magic. Only golems or magical constructs that do not possess true consciousness are allowed to be created. This is a strict rule in the world of magic. The creation of life is the prerogative of higher powers. Gargus excitedly shouted that he had materialized his favorite sword, the same one he had trained with at home, only now it was not wooden but real. His sister chose the spear while James settled on the sword. A conversation ensued about a possible meeting inside the labyrinth. There are no strict rules inside the labyrinth. Everything is determined by current circumstances. Competition is the basis of the ritual. Now the participants had to not only show strength, but also demonstrate their ability to interact with others. And now, with this weapon of light, they had to enter the labyrinth, not for the sake of battle, but for the sake of proof. Despite their differences, they all belonged to the same family. This idea provoked a mixed reaction. Each was given an amulet with a sparkling diamond. It was explained that the pendant was not just a decoration. It establishes a mental connection with the owner. If a participant in the labyrinth reaches a critical level of stress or finds themselves in serious danger, the amulet will react, and the creator of the labyrinth will intervene to prevent unforeseen consequences. In addition, if someone feels that they are unable to continue the test, it will be enough to knock on the stone on the pendant and say, "Help!" When everything was prepared, Roberian gave the final command. He reminded the participants that, despite the common entrance to the cave, the path inside would be unique for everyone. One by one, the participants began to enter. Their faces showed determination, excitement, and inner concentration. The wish for good luck sounded almost casual, but everyone understood that in the future they would have to rely only on their own strength. The blood ritual began. James found himself inside the labyrinth. The space was cramped, narrow corridors, walls resting against the ceiling, eliminating the ability to use long weapons or use vertical maneuvers. That is why the choice fell on a sword and shield, a reliable combination, time-tested and suitable for a wide variety of conditions. In the past, in another life, he had faced similar trials more than once, and even this labyrinth was created for children. It should be very simple. One of the participants, having come across slugs with eyes and strange smiling faces, panicked. He swung his sword desperately, fighting off the approaching creatures, and screamed in panic for help. Roberian's appearance was almost instantaneous. The magician seemed to emerge from thin air. He silently grabbed the participant and disappeared with him. Less than an hour had passed since the start of the blood ritual, and 3 people had already escaped from the labyrinth. Roberian and the head of the family watched this with an expression of condemnation in which there was a barely concealed pity. They sent the frightened children home with brief instructions to rest, without bothering with long explanations. The children, upset and embarrassed, silently left. The remaining participants continued the test. They were observed through magic rings, smooth hoops floating in the air, which displayed the scenes taking place in the labyrinth. Roberian and the leader closely watched every move, battle, and decision of those who were still in the game. Gargus fights goblins, creatures armed with wooden clubs and swords. He walked forward without fear, easily dealing with the monsters that came his way. His sister encountered slugs, fast and cunning creatures. Dejara was smart, believing that it was better to avoid combat, since the main goal was to get out of the labyrinth intact. Before the ritual began, Cian and her sister studied several drawings of the labyrinths and developed tactics to avoid obvious traps. Cian was overly cautious, but that allowed him to avoid traps. Sienna met the goblins and engaged in battle, but soon reached a dead end and was forced to turn back. Despite this, she had good perceptual skills and flexible thinking, although she sometimes showed childish spontaneity. The monsters in the labyrinth weren't just physical obstacles, they were created using magic. Yod demonstrated his skill by cutting down one of these monsters with his sword, indicating his significant interest in magic since childhood. Even famous historians of magic were invited to teach him, but Yod refused further studies. Yod accepted his fate and decided to become the head of the family for the sake of his mother. He understood that magic did not provide a direct advantage in the struggle for inheritance, although it opened up limitless possibilities. Deep down, Glade hoped that Yod would put his doubts aside and follow his destiny. If the passion for magic is still alive in him, then he has a chance to become a disciple of the Red Magic Tower. There is no exact answer now, but Roberian is ready to take Yoda to the tower. However, much depends on the abilities of the young man. Yod, a descendant of great Arthur, had respect for wise Sandy. He was attracted to her story of heroic adventures. After all, every time the group found itself in danger, it used magic to find unexpected and effective solutions. Glade himself had read this book since childhood, but he confessed he liked another hero the most, not great Arthur or wise Sina. Everyone's attention was distracted when an unexpected scene appeared on the screen. James was confronted by a huge troll. James cut the troll in half with his sword, causing shock among the onlookers. Everyone was amazed by his strength and skill. This warrior is James Leinhard. He is indeed only 13 years old and has never encountered trolls before. Despite this, he was able not only to maintain his composure, but also to fight bravely and without unnecessary movements. Trolls are usually not created for direct combat, but as obstacles to be avoided using tricks. However, this troll was larger than usual, and it is amazing that the young man was able to deal with it so easily. However, this is possible if a person has extraordinary talent. Such gifted children in their circle have a special name, genius. When they met the troll, Gargus had 2 arrows sticking out of their backs. The sword in his hands confidently struck at the troll, which eventually crumbled into magical golden dust. Despite this, the monster managed to deliver powerful blows, damaging muscles and breaking ribs. After this battle, he fell unconscious to the floor, feeling the full weight of the wounds inflicted. Cian faced the troll. He knew he was facing a serious opponent. He was going to cheat. He threw a rock to the side, distracting the monster. The troll turned at the sound, and Cian took advantage of the moment to slip past unnoticed. The plan worked. He ran further. Soon he met Seal. Even though they started in different parts of the labyrinth, it was now clear that they were already close to the center. A few days ago, James had seriously hurt his pride by humiliating him right in front of Seal. Now there is a chance to regain lost honor. The sister thought that if the labyrinth was just an illusion, then it was possible to encounter any kind of monsters in it, including ghosts. Cian promised to protect his sister from everything, but suddenly he saw something. Screams were heard. It was Dejera. She was covered in blood from the previous traps. She herself was frightened by her own unexpected attack. Cian suddenly screamed, surprising everyone with his appearance. Her brother noticed that she was running away, which only added to his shame in front of Ciel. He had no intention of forgiving such an act and ran in pursuit with Ciel. Dejera realized that she couldn't handle them alone, and she wondered where Gargus, that muscular but clumsy oaf, could have disappeared to. She was trapped. The floor beneath her feet began to collapse. She managed to run to the other side. The distance turned out to be too great to jump over. The twins will have to find a way around. Xian knew that he couldn't afford to look weaker in Ciel's eyes, so he decided to use his magic. Xian jumped and ran through the air, calling for his sister to jump to catch her on the other side. Ciel trusted and jumped over the chasm just as he expected. She was determined and ready to go all the way. The chase resumed, and soon Qian, Ciel, and Dejera found themselves in the center of the labyrinth, where they were met by the main monster. James was already there, waiting to see who would get there first. He arrived at the center of the labyrinth before the others, getting there first, but began to wait for the others. This could mean agreeing to the offer to unite with Gargus to fight together against the main monster. However, the real reason was that he decided to give in, being confident that he could handle the monster alone. At the same time, James took into account the efforts of the other participants, who put in a lot of work to get to the center. The monster will only start attacking when approached closely, remaining in a waiting state. The order of the battle was set. Dejera would go out first, then Cian, and finally Ciel. Perhaps the difficulties of the battle will stop one who felt weakened by the trials. Dejira resolutely refused to give up, put a bandage on her forehead and prepared for battle. She was confident in her strength and intended to be the first to engage in battle with the main monster. Cian expressed his firm belief that he would be the one to defeat the monster. If this happens, then as a sign of respect and recognition of his opponent's strength, James promised to call him Big Brother. The Minotaur is a monster familiar from all stories about labyrinths. His figure was impressive. He turned out to be even larger than the troll he had already encountered. However, despite their size, Minotaurs rarely showed aggression on the level of trolls or ogres. This was precisely what made them different, a frightening appearance with relative calm. Cian was confident that he could deal with such an enemy on his own, but Dejira faced a much more difficult test. Against such a brute, all her tenacity and courage would be required. Finding herself on the threshold of the decisive battle, she realized that there was no turning back. The monster had incredible endurance. Its skin was so thick that Dejira's spear could not pierce it. The next second, a huge hand grabbed her and easily threw her aside. She fell, hit the ground, and the monster stopped. It was strange. He could have finished her off, but he didn't. The monster wasn't real. It was a test, and once the enemy was no longer capable of fighting, the fight was over. Now it's Cian's turn. He glanced at James challengingly, pointing out that the side branch members were far inferior to those born into the main family. James just smirked, not hiding his contempt. Cian now has a sword that is enhanced with magic, capable of penetrating the strongest armor. It takes at least 10 years of hard training and practice to create such a weapon. That is why the representatives of the main family were always a cut above the rest. However, it will not be possible to maintain the sword's magical energy for long. It will only be enough to deliver a few decisive blows. Suddenly, the sword went out, and everyone realized that a special rule was in effect here. The purpose of the ritual is to prove that everyone is worthy of being called a descendant of Great Arthur, regardless of whether he belongs to a direct or collateral branch of the family. The point is that the labyrinth is Roberian's creation, and he specifically created this place so that magic could not be used in the center of the battle. Thus, fighters from the main and side branches find themselves on equal terms, fighting only with their own strength and skills. The ridicule around him hurt Cian, and without magic he was confident that he could defeat the monster. Cian rushed into battle with determination, without thinking about the consequences. He decided to attack the Minotaur, realizing that light wounds would not stop the monster. The sword had to be driven deeper into the leg. The attack succeeded, but the blow was blocked by the knee. Following this, a huge hand grabbed him and threw him far into the air. James mockingly noted that Cian had lost. Irritation was reflected on the enemy's face. When it was Ciel's turn, she refused to go. The magic sword in the center of the labyrinth does not work. James smirked at her cleverness and picked up his sword and shield. James went on the attack despite the danger. He needs to make an effort to lose. The Minotaur stood motionless, preparing for the fight. Blows came, one after another, James landing precise blows, hitting the monster right in the face. The Minotaur howled in pain but did not give up. James didn't stop, continuing to attack, focusing on one vulnerable spot. The opponents watched what was happening in shock, not believing in James's tenacity and skill. James struck the throat and green liquid flowed out of the wound. The Minotaur fell to the ground. James shook the drops of green blood from his sword and proudly declared that he had won. Everyone was stunned. Cian regretted that magic was forbidden. Otherwise, the result could have been completely different. Although he might not have survived such a battle, Cian acknowledged James's skill, amazed by his precision and speed. A strange feeling appeared inside James, not fear but overwhelming excitement. He thought about it. The Minotaur's body turned into golden pollen, a sign that the ritual was complete. The guy from the side branch, who wasn't even taught magic, managed to destroy the Minotaur thanks to his skill, the head reasoned. Roberian explained that it was almost impossible to defeat the main monster alone. Therefore, the ritual was designed so that children would learn to work in a team. Minotaur is designed to test the interaction skills of the participants. They had to use different tactics when fighting together. James easily passed all the monsters and traps thanks to his endurance and skills. Since James arrived, he's been training hard every day. In his hometown of Gidal, James is known for his strength and resilience. The ritual, intended as a test of teamwork and boundary pushing, unexpectedly revealed a true gift in James. Despite the fact that James was superior to his own children, there was no irritation or envy in his gaze, just restrained pride and acceptance of the inevitable. For Glade, this ritual became a test not only for the children, but for himself as well. He clearly realized that the strength of a family is not in its name, but in its actions. If his children turn out to be weaker, it means that they will not be able to hold on to what should rightfully belong to the strongest. In the clearing where Roberian had transported them with magic, the air was filled with a light glow from the residual energy of the ritual. James, a boy from a side branch, turned out to be stronger, more agile, and wiser than the children of the main family. Such a discovery could not only strengthen the authority of the clan, but also threaten the hierarchy within it. If the side branches see that their representative has managed to bypass the heirs, this will give them reason to doubt the privileges of the main line. The words of his old friend continued to sound in his head to adopt Eugene. This proposal, in its essence, was not only a political step, but also a recognition of superiority. While Glade was pondering the consequences, the participants of the test began to come out into the clearing. The rivals stood in a row, still tired. The head of the clan looked at each of them carefully. His gaze settled on Yoda. Despite his good abilities, he couldn't even get halfway there. The reason for this was his excessive passion for magic and encounters with monsters. He was distracted from the purpose of the ritual. This was disappointing. At a time when he needed to be focused and determined, he allowed himself to be carried away by his emotions. But Cian and Ciela, although they did not defeat the main monster, demonstrated resilience, managing to reach the very center. They were stopped by the Minotaur, but considering their age, the leader considered it a worthy result. These kids will still have time to develop their skills, and perhaps one day they will surpass even the current favorites. He noted that they were monitored throughout the entire trial. From the very beginning, the labyrinth seemed like a serious challenge, but the participants were able to prove that they were worthy of their origin. The head of the clan addressed the participants, his gaze particularly lingering on James. He stood out among all of them. He deftly passed through the labyrinth, overcame the traps, crushed the monsters, and most importantly, remained unharmed. Gargus couldn't hide his surprise. How could such a puny boy manage to deal with someone who nearly broke the bones of others? And then he noted with regret that James lacked access to special elixirs that strengthened the body, the ones that have been passed down through their family for ages. With such reinforcement, his potential could become even more terrifying. Roberian expected that the children would spend at least 2 days in the labyrinth, encountering impassable obstacles. However, their expectations were dashed. After all, the blood of great Arthur himself flowed through their veins. Even if he is still young, his innate talent has already made itself known. The head of the clan completed the ceremony. He told the children to go back and rest, for they were in for some well-deserved peace after their ordeal. At a sign, Roberian led the children away, leaving the chief alone with James. Sienna was surprised to see this. She knew James was expecting a gift, but she didn't think it would happen so soon. Sienna remembered how, since childhood, she had asked her father to show her this secret place, but he had never fulfilled her request. And now James was heading there. The crimson light of the setting sun painted the treetops scarlet. Against the backdrop of this beauty, James silently walked behind the head of the family, feeling the taste of victory. The leader broke the silence, noting James's skill. He reminded him that he was confident in the use of various types of weapons. In the labyrinth he used a sword and shield, but in the fight with other participants he preferred a spear. The head also knew about his duel with Dejera. Although it is not surprising, everything that happened in the family did not escape his attention. Today the sword is revered as the emblem of the Lionheart family, but their great ancestor Arthur, who bore the title of the Almighty Master, was famous for being able to wield any weapon. But there was another hero who masterfully wielded all weapons. The head of the family suddenly began to talk about his sympathies for Harry, not for the infallible hero, but for the one who always remained in his shadow. His humanity, his struggle with his own insecurities, and most importantly, his sacrifice for the sake of a friend. All this left a mark on the soul deeper than Arthur's perfection. The treasury appeared. His heart began to beat faster. The quiet creaking of stone steps echoed throughout the spacious dungeon. This is a confession. He has been admitted into the inner sanctum of the Lanehart family. The elders of the Senate, the old lions, were the guardians of traditions, strict judges, and unshakable pillars of the family. Getting their consent costs a lot. Among these relics were items that belonged to the great Arthur himself, the founder of the family. James pointed to the sacred sword in the treasury. The sword was the symbol of the House of Lanehart and could not belong to one person. Since the time of Arthur the Great, no one has been honored with the sword's recognition. This confession will only become clear when you see the weapon itself. They went down to the treasury. Glade bit his finger and dripped blood onto the lion's face, which opened the gate. Entry was granted. But the head of the family decided to wait outside so that James could freely choose what he really needed without looking back. Once inside the treasury, James's gaze immediately fell on the sacred sword. He stretched his arms, preparing for the test ahead. The legends of his origin came alive in his memory. A blade given to the Lord once sealed in the great temple, renowned as the weapon that pierced the heart of the Demon King helmet. Despite its fame, in later times the sword was used only as a torch. James looked with interest at the sacred sword embedded in the pedestal. He tried to pull it out of the pedestal, but the sword did not even budge. The effort was in vain. He stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead. And with a degree of disappointment, he admitted that even if he had been able to extract it, the sacred sword would still not have been given to him. After looking around the room, he continued his way between the shelves and pedestals. Another artifact attracted attention: the blade of the Devourer Aspel. A weapon that absorbs enemy mana and is capable of cutting through even the most powerful streams of magic. But James knew that to fully utilize his potential, he needed not only physical skill, but also a deep knowledge of magic. Arthur, his legendary ancestor, dealt with it brilliantly precisely because he was a powerful magician. He continued his inspection, noticing other familiar objects around him. The dragon spear of Carbaz. When it flared up, it rivaled the breath of a real dragon. Storm Sword of Vineth, blessed by the Wind Spirit King, controller of the storm. Pernoy's Stormbow, a weapon that held the power of the heavenly storm and could control streams of lightning. Zabel's Blade of No Return. It hummed softly, ready to disintegrate into hundreds of ringing segments, turning into a deadly whip. Guidance Shield. Deep within it lurked a power capable of nullifying any damage, sending it into the void, as if the enemy was striking the abyss. James stopped in the center of the room. Whatever choice he made, none of these artifacts would disappoint him. However, the thought of the lost treasures did not give him any peace. Neither the demonic spear nor the moonlight sword. Greedy, calculating, they hid everything important in inaccessible storerooms. Vineth's storm sword beckoned. It was perfect, light, versatile, with access to the power of spirits. Even without advanced magic, James could use its potential, making him the best choice among all of them. He walked around the room again. Perhaps there was something unexpected lurking in the shadows, among the less noticeable exhibits. Jewelry and accessories lay in a niche on velvet pillows. The necklace lay in the niche. James felt everything around him become quieter. The remaining treasures, powerful artifacts, weapons capable of crushing armies, faded for a moment. He knew this necklace down to the smallest detail. It accompanied him until the very end. He died with it. It was a gift from his parents. Memories came flooding back, the monsters that had eaten his parents, the merciless revenge. And now it's here, in the Lanehart family treasury. And if it's here, then his body wasn't left on the battlefield. And yet the pain remained. Even if the deal with Helmet saved millions, it betrayed the oath they had taken together in the fight. Arthur, Sandy, Tomi, Yenny, 4 who went through the horrors of war side by side. But when the moment of final victory arrived, something changed. Instead of the final blow, there was an agreement. Perhaps it was his death that changed everything. His death could have been the moment when the balance was shaken. Without him, there was not enough determination, not enough faith, not enough will to finish what was started. He didn't want to judge them. They were his friends, his brothers and sisters in arms. The chief was surprised by James's choice, the necklace. There was nothing special about his appearance. Rough, old, devoid of grace, like a random object lost among treasures. The lion's magic reacted. The eyes on the statue glowed red. The item was not listed in the treasury's inventory. The head of the family watched silently. James could have pointed to more powerful objects, artifacts worthy of a hero. The head of the family accepted the decision without objection, although he expressed the need for Sir Roberian to conduct an identification of the necklace. The origin of the object remained unknown, but it could contain great magic. The tech necklaces were not on the Lanehart treasure list, so one more item was allowed. The young man hurried back to the treasury, amazed at the compliance of the head of the family. There was no hesitation. The choice fell on Vineth's storm sword. The hilt tightened in his hands, as if the sword itself was choosing its owner. Now the weapon belonged to him. The castle at night was illuminated by burning windows. The silence was broken by a heated conversation. James's choice surprised Dejera, who said he was too skilled with a spear to suddenly choose a sword. James emphasized that he was equally skilled with both a spear and a sword. For him, the choice was purely personal. Gargus noted that the lightness of the new weapon was completely at odds with the appearance and style of his opponent, which, in his opinion, would be better suited to something rough and heavy, a hammer or a battle axe. He began to persuade James to visit their mansion, promising generous supplies of potions and special conditions. Dejera ordered him to stop the meaningless chatter and called his brother a musclehead, demanded that James finally draw his weapon. Their gazes crossed like blades. He slowly removed the protective cover from the sword, revealing a weapon of amazing beauty. It was the storm sword of Fene, a rare artifact blessed by the Wind Spirit King himself. As the patriarch said, the one who wields this sword can summon not only the spirits of the wind. Dejera noted that the sword certainly looks impressive, but the choice of a spear would have been much more practical. There were enough worthy specimens in the treasury. She desired to wield the dragon spear of Carboza, whose attack was comparable in destructive power to the breath of a dragon. James lied that he was not familiar with such a weapon. The question of Runtos's demonic spear never died down. It had long been considered one of the most powerful weapons that great Arthur had ever wielded. Legends surrounded this spear, claiming that it belonged to the demonic king of cruelty himself, the fourth of the 5 lords of hell who ruled the demon world 300 years ago. These kings represented a hierarchy of terror. First rank, demonic king of destruction. Second rank, demonic king of imprisonment. Third rank, demonic king of fury. Fourth rank, demonic king of cruelty. Fifth rank, demonic king of slaughter. Each of them possessed an artifact imbued with immeasurable power and evil. The truly powerful weapon was considered to be the Ziggullard, a massive crushing hammer that had previously belonged to the demonic king of slaughter. The spear of Runtos and the hammer of Ziggullard were indeed part of the arsenal of great Arthur, but no traces of them were found in the treasury. Perhaps due to the dark and sinister nature of these artifacts, it was decided to seal them somewhere else, away from human eyes and hands. The conversation about Arthur's legendary weapon increasingly resembled a childish argument in which everyone tried to defend their opinion. However, among all the artifacts Arthur left behind, there was one that was worth everything. The moonlight blade is thin and almost ethereal, created from a magical fragment that emits the light of the night sky. This is the true greatest weapon Arthur ever wielded. Both the King of Slaughter and the King of Cruelty fell before the moonlight blade. Now in his new life, James held for the first time a sword he could truly call his own. He moved with it as if the sword were his shadow. A slight gust of wind caused by his swings ruffled the hair of the twins watching him. The lines of his movements were precise, sharp, but at the same time graceful. Every step, every turn of the blade was not accidental. It was training, but power and self-confidence were already visible in it. The brother and sister stood a little behind, their gaze mixed with surprise and admiration. The head of the family's office was shrouded in silence. Roberian entered, holding the amulet in his hands. He walked up to the table and carefully laid the necklace out on the table. Simple, faded by time, it lay silently, like an insignificant trinket. He reported that no traces of magic were found on it. James might have been lying. Although, if the leader had refused him his second choice, he would have been left with nothing. It would have been an unwise risk. Roberian asked permission to look at the necklace again. He suggested using an ancient spell, mana memory magic. This is a rare, almost forgotten art created by Senamudra herself, one of the most outstanding magicians of the past. Mana, as an integral part of the universe, permeates everything, from air to stone, from the living to the dead. Roberian attempted to use a rare technique, to read the remnants of mana memory preserved in the necklace. It was possible to extract little information, something vague and fragmentary. The age of the necklace is determined to be over 100 years. The clearest vision is a street in the city center, a shop where this necklace was once bought. Most likely, long years spent near the artifacts from the treasury weakened the mana contained in this item. The head of the family noted that given such a period of time, it is unlikely that anyone living today will be able to identify the necklace. But be that as it may, there is no magic in it, and therefore there are no obstacles to transmission. He decided to return it to James, a young man who, for the sake of this simple, at first glance object, gave up much more valuable treasures. The head of the family chuckled quietly, feeling an unexpected sympathy for the boy. He watched James's training from the window and noted that he did not feel any hostility towards him. Despite the young man's unusual origins, he displayed a determination and strength of spirit that could not be faked. After some thought, he decided to make the young man an important offer. Eventually, it was decided to adopt James Leinhardt as their own son. Keon waves cheerfully at James. James remains reserved. Keon Leinhardt is the patriarch's younger brother, an eccentric who gave up marriage in order to go on campaigns with his brother Gumatura. He came to escort James. Word of James's success had already spread throughout the palace. James looks at him in surprise. Keon's face lights up with a smile. He suddenly grabs James in a bear hug. James hesitated a little in the hug, still polite but slightly embarrassed. Keon explained that his brother had wanted to send a knight, but he volunteered to see James for himself. He was told a lot about the ritual, but he could not be present. Such is the tradition. The right to observe belongs only to the patriarch. Probably Mrs. Roberian was present because she was responsible for the preparations. He stressed that he does not hold a grudge against his brother. It is simply a fact. Eugene felt like he sounded like he was up to no good. James assured them there was no need to worry, and Keon expressed hope that Gillard would take the situation just as calmly. Keon's behavior revealed a freedom-loving and frivolous character to the exact extent corresponding to his appearance. Perhaps that is why he is still not married. Eugene walked thoughtfully down the corridor, not understanding why he had been called. Perhaps to congratulate on winning the blood inheritance ritual. But the congratulations have already been given. James knocked on the door and was allowed to enter. Keon winked playfully with a small smile. He hoped that their paths would cross more often. Eugene thought about the strange people surrounding him with a slight embarrassed smile. The patriarch stood at his desk in his office. There were trays of muffins on the table in the middle of the room. He apologized for the sudden call and invited them to sit down. They sat down opposite each other. The patriarch handed over the necklace and said that he had asked Roberian to examine it. It turned out that this was an ordinary decoration that did not have any magic. Despite attempts to use the mana memory, seen as ancient magic, nothing important could be revealed. As a result, it is only known that the necklace was most likely purchased in one of the capital's back streets about 100 years ago. James was sure he had worn it more than 300 years ago, because it had belonged to him for a whole decade. There could be no mistake about that. Robertian wouldn't lie, maybe it's a mistake. So James wondered, perhaps the necklace contained a spell that could deceive even the master of the magic tower. Arthur could cast such magic. The necklace was returned to James. Finally, it belongs to him. He thanked her and put on the jewelry. The reason for the call turned out to be not only the return of the necklace, an offer that could benefit his future. Yes, marriage. However, James made it clear that he is not interested in marriage yet, despite Seal's kindness and beauty. Now everything fell into place. Despite the way he treated Cian, she remained friendly. It was all part of a plan to arrange a marriage of convenience. Gillard Leinhardt seemed like a good man. He didn't expect him to do something like this. Eugene considered himself too young to marry. It would require his father's approval. He began to make excuses, but the patriarch interrupted him, noting the misunderstanding. Marrying Seal was not his intention. James was quite surprised. He felt ashamed. This was the worst possible assumption. The thought of marrying a 13-year-old girl flashed through his mind. At that age, the mind often plays with fantasies, James justified himself. He didn't have time to finish his thoughts when the head of the family suddenly announced his desire to adopt him. This news was no less shocking than the thoughts of marriage. Joining the main branch of the family seemed to him both frightening and tempting at the same time. The head of the family apologized for the surprise and explained that he could accept him as his son without infringing on his father. Even though he had never seen Gerard before, he promised to respect him like a brother. James thought for a moment, digesting what he had heard. James' refusal to adopt will not affect the patriarch's relationship with his family. Glade notes that she respects the young man's choice and wishes him luck, despite his regret in case of refusal. James doubts and understands that he cannot make such a decision alone. He needs to consult with his father. The head of the family agrees to postpone the decision until after the banquet and promises to send a carriage for James's father. Over a cup of tea, James wonders what exactly adoption promises. Living in a main family will give you many benefits. The opportunity to learn from the best knights in the family's service. James expressed his desire to learn from the strongest if he remained in the main family. He hoped to receive lessons personally from the head of the family. The patriarch was a little confused. Although Glade is not against training him, there is a more suitable one for the role of teacher of the strongest, Keon. Even though the head of the family was once stronger, Keon had now surpassed him. James was surprised, not believing in the strength of that boy. The chief was interested in whether James possessed magic, but for now James had no desire to master mana, as he was afraid of starting to practice unconsciously. But James hasn't stopped training hard since his arrival. Mana stones found in powerful monsters were necessary for mastering magic, but their extraction became increasingly difficult as the stone's efficiency increased. In addition, successful training required an experienced mentor, which Gerard's family was unlikely to provide. These conditions were not sufficient for James to fully realize his potential, but the patriarch realized that his words could cause the boy to feel hostility towards his own family. Despite this, the conversation was ended, and the patriarch suggested returning to the topic later. They finished their tea, the cakes were almost eaten. The patriarch offered to organize an escort for James, but it wasn't necessary for James. It was a short walk. As he walked down the corridor, he caught a slight scent of perfume. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement. Someone was hiding nearby. Soon the edge of the dress came into view. The patriarch's second wife. She had been standing there for a long time, but pretended that she had bumped into him by accident. Eugene greeted them in a reserved manner, introducing himself with all the formalities. Anisilla listened attentively, assessing his audacity and strength, which he had already demonstrated by defeating a representative of the main branch before the blood inheritance ritual. She understood that this simple guy from the provinces was quickly gaining strength and confidence. It is better to be friends with him than enemies. She looked at him with a polite smile, behind which was hidden a cold calculation. The idea of bringing the upstart down with marriage and seal seemed very tempting to her. It was for this very reason that she pushed her daughter to get closer to this young man. The interest that arose in her in the topic of his conversation with the patriarch was not satisfied. James made it clear that he did not intend to reveal the content of the conversation. Anisilla hastened to smooth over the impression, declaring that she had not intended to ask questions at all, but simply wanted to convey something important. She mentioned the old incident with Sane with regret, and she apologized. Such an opportunity had not arisen before, supposedly because of the tense period before the ritual. Eugene made it clear that the incident had long since been resolved. She noted his maturity, promised to reprimand Sane, and expressed hope that the relationship between them would improve. James assured them that they would definitely get along, because they were from one big family. Anisilla, although she maintained a benevolent expression on her face, shuddered inwardly. "Family," she repeated to herself with disgust. "It's disgusting to hear this from the lips of this impudent upstart." Eugene asked permission to take his leave with cold politeness. He silently walked away, feeling her piercing gaze on his back. Matriarch Anisilla, a woman who was hostile from the start, not because of his actions but simply because of his origin, a side branch. That was enough to earn her contempt. Better to avoid further encounters with this woman. 2 days later, a carriage drawn by a pair of strong horses crossed the gates of the main family's estate. Gerard Leinhard stepped onto the pavement in front of the mansion, with Keon by his side, who had accompanied him on his journey. Gerard kept his eyes on the building's facade, mentally replaying the events of the last few days. He still found it hard to believe. His son had actually won the blood inheritance ritual. James had defeated the children of the patriarch himself. From an early age he showed outstanding talent, but the side branch always had fewer opportunities for its development. Gerard feared that the harsh truth would be revealed to his son at the ritual, that the difference between the branches was too great, and neither talent nor effort could overcome it. So it seemed to him. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. Eugene, now James, was waving from the entrance. The patriarch himself was standing next to him. Gerard called out to his son and hurried to meet him. They threw themselves into each other's arms, father and son together again. The patriarch watched the reunion with a slight warm smile. Gerard, barely containing his emotions, hugged James tightly. He spoke through tears, words of pride, regret, and relief. Wiping tears from his face, he finally noticed the patriarch and bowed discreetly as a sign of respect. Gerard and the patriarch introduced themselves to each other. They exchanged brief, formal greetings, their gestures expressing mutual respect. The patriarch expressed a desire to speak with Gerard alone. He immediately agreed without asking unnecessary questions. They moved inside the estate, leaving James in the sunlit courtyard. The room, decorated with golden lions, radiated a solemn austerity. Gerard visibly tensed up when he heard the proposal to adopt. The head of the family assured that after the adoption, he, like his son, will also be given due respect. Gerard, however, looked upset and carefully expressed his concerns. While he admitted he was proud of how highly his son was regarded, as a father he couldn't help but think about the possible consequences. The main concern was not the patriarch's integrity, but the attitude of the rest of the family. 3 existing heirs would mean that James, as an adopted heir, would have to face alienation and rejection. The patriarch understood the essence of Gerard's concerns. He admitted that the Leinhardt family was indeed very strict in its observance of tradition. Accepting a child from a collateral branch was not an easy decision, and he had no illusions about easy acceptance from all members of the household. However, he explained that he had no intention of paving the way for Eugene to become patriarch. His proposal was not about power or ambition, but rather about unlocking potential. In the main branch, James will have connections, resources, friends, and mentors that were not available to him in Guidel. This will ensure him a stable and bright future if he remains true to himself and does not give in to greed. Gerard listened to him with respect and politely asked to be allowed to discuss the matter with his son in private first. It was a clear morning outside. James was focused on practicing his new sword, each swing precise and measured. Gerard appeared on the horizon, approaching at a slow pace. His expression immediately betrayed his agitation. There was anxiety, confusion in it. He watched his son with longing. The sword in James's hands, the storm sword of Wynneth, was a weapon of rare value, one that could not have been purchased even with all the family's savings. Coming closer, he reported the conversation with the patriarch. Adoption. James calmly confirmed that he had already been aware of it. He did not object to this idea. On the contrary, he understood the prospects it could open up. Gerard, although he supported this decision, did not hide his fears. He knew that the path to the main family would not be easy. However, his son assured him that he would not allow anyone to pass him by. These words touched Gerard deeply. He couldn't hold back his tears. Gerard reminded his son of his name, that it was connected to him and his late mother. James, without hesitation, confirmed that no matter how his status changed, his only real father will always remain Gerard Leinhardt. James knew clearly that the decision was almost made. Adoption was only a matter of time. In the eyes of others, he had already ceased to be a simple child of a side branch. His first wife, Theonis, and second wife, Anisilla, were 2 women of influence. He found himself under their close surveillance. He clearly realized that the atmosphere in the main family would not be favorable. 2 paths lay before him. The first is to turn a blind eye to hostility, not get involved in intrigues, and focus on your own goals. The second is the opposite. Destroy those who stand in his way, surpass them, prove his strength to rule. If necessary, he will choose the second path. Patriarch Glade Leinhardt held a gala reception, inviting the families of all participants in the blood inheritance ritual. The spacious hall was flooded with light. Glasses of champagne glittered in the guests' hands. People kept coming up to Gerard, praising their son, expressing admiration, offering him a rare potion for muscle growth. Among them was definitely Gardas's father. James turned away reservedly, hoping that they would not pay attention to him in the future. The patriarch's second wife, Anisilla, stood by the wall with her son. She watched silently as her son Cian looked very sad. She quietly but coldly ordered him to raise his head. She reminded him that from this day on he would be compared to James. All eyes would be on their defeat. The fact that the offspring of the main line failed to win the ritual for the first time in history will become a subject of ridicule and shame. And now you are a symbol of this defeat. Sane was silent, not looking up, but his hands were shaking. Anisilla said he couldn't afford to be humble. This humiliation had to be the impetus for growth. Even if James does not become patriarch, his position will still be influential. Therefore, Xian has no right to relax. He will have to work twice as hard to win respect and the title. And what's more, he should try to get closer to James. She advised him to strengthen the brotherly bond between them. In the future, an alliance with James could be decisive. Ciel ate the cake and innocently asked James if they were now brother and sister. He nodded calmly. Then she asked with a sly smile if he would call her older sister now, if Ciel were older than Cian. But as soon as the difference was just 5 seconds, he confidently called her the younger one. Ciel begged him pleadingly. He snorted and turned away. Calling a 13-year-old girl his big sister was beyond the pale, and he would rather die. Roberian made it clear that he could not accept Yoda as a student without question. The Red Tower of Mages, which specializes in summoning magic, requires candidates to pass a test approved by the Kingdom of Arath. Only after successful completion can we talk about further education. However, even successfully passing the test does not guarantee anything. In the Kingdom of Arath, the name Lionheart does not command much respect. Without a remarkable talent capable of silencing any critics, the chances of learning from a master are extremely slim. Despite this, Yod expressed his willingness to accept the challenge. Roberian, as an old friend of the Patriarch, assured that he would provide the young man with protection from prejudice and will help to provide the best conditions for the development of his magical abilities. Yod felt tension but also relief. The very fact of being able to escape the stifling atmosphere of the Lionheart family was already a great gift for him. The Patriarch, watching the conversation, did not intervene. This was a decision Yod had to make for himself. Tionis reminded her son that this opportunity was a gift from his father. In Arata, he will finally be able to practice the magic he loves so much. But despite this, she insisted Yod was her son and potential heir to the title of Patriarch. Even far from home, he must not forget this. The Patriarch stopped her. Tionis tried to justify herself by saying that she only wanted to encourage her son. But inside she was seething. Anasila would be happy with this turn of events. She was unhappy with the realization that her son was leaving. Although she understood that she was now powerless to influence the decision made. Yod did not live up to his family's expectations. He did not have the natural greatness that his pedigree suggested. He was soft, naive, weak-willed, but that was precisely why Arath was an opportunity. Not only for learning magic, but also for building useful connections, without which he will not be able to survive in the future. And yet, in the end, she reminded him, he is the legitimate son of the Lionheart family. Yod submitted to his mother's will. The next morning, after a lavish banquet, Roberian and Yod left the estate and headed towards the Kingdom of Arath. The rest of the families from the side branches have already gone home. Eugene and Gerard remained in the spare quarters provided by the head of the family. Today, James was to engage in magical practice for the first time since his reincarnation. In this world, there were 2 recognized ways to develop mana: breathing and physical training. In his past life, James preferred to develop mana through physical training. However, later, on the advice of Sandy and Arthur himself, he revised his approach and began to focus on his breathing. A mana source is a special area where energy is concentrated with abnormal density. In the deep forest on the territory belonging to the Patriarch, there was such a source. This spring was not a natural phenomenon. It was created by Arthur, the legendary founder of the family, about 300 years ago. Artificially forming a mana accumulation point required colossal knowledge and strength. Only Arthur could decide on such a thing. James was ready to dive into the depths of the flow of power on which his future depended. Cian and Selah began training at age 6 and were able to sense mana after 4 days, while it took Yod about 2 weeks. Typically, children from side branches start classes at about the same age as James. It takes about a month for them to get used to mana. But considering they were at the mana well, James was expected to get used to it much faster. About 10 days. For James, 10 days was too long. He was confident that he could do it in less than 10 minutes. After the conversation, they headed to a small wooden villa, the place where the first classes would begin. James and Keon entered the villa, where it was quiet and cool. Keon led him down the concrete stairs. The basement turned out to be a spacious hall with circles engraved on the floor, inside of which golden emblems shone. In the center of the largest circle, Keon motioned for James to sit down. Keon explained that the mana absorption technique was an ancient legacy of their ancestor, Arthur. This technique was passed down within the main line of the Lionheart family and was not available to the sidelines, who had to resort to a simplified and less effective method known as the Scarlet Flame Ritual. Keon concentrated, and his body began to emit a soft white glow. His hair rose up as if in zero gravity. Although James did not personally know the details of the white flame ritual, he remembered its unique form well from the past. Arthur, the legendary ancestor of the family, was enveloped in a complete layer of mana, which materialized as a white flame. Sometimes it even resembled a lion's mane flowing down his back. In his previous life, James was never able to experience what this technique was capable of, but its image was deeply imprinted in his memory. Keon, meanwhile, explained that it was impossible to feel mana the first time, and James needed to concentrate on breathing. But James felt her. Keon smiled. He decided that the student was confusing his feelings, perhaps. Keon extended his hand and used his index finger to create a tiny ball of light that he sent towards James. Keon didn't believe it. James, without opening his eyes, he accurately pointed out the direction of the light's movement. It defies any explanation. Keon was surprised, but decided that it was time to move on to the next step. James closed his eyes and began to breathe slowly and evenly, absorbing the streams of mana. He imagined how with each breath he drew mana into his body and then directed it to his heart. Gradually his hands began to glow. The glow spread up my arms, engulfed my entire body, and turned into a steady flow of energy. Experienced Keon had not expected such a result. Usually it takes days to sense mana, but James was already manipulating it, directing it, controlling it. All that remained was to wait for the moment when the body would finally accept this force as a part of itself. James felt mana flowing into his body with astonishing ease with every breath he took. Even in his previous life, he had no difficulty breathing mana, but his current body was superior to his previous one in every way. However, James understood that even with such efficiency, caution must not be lost. The young body's organism has limits, and oversaturation can lead to overload. He stopped, deciding that this amount was enough for the moment. Even a cursory glance was enough to understand that James's core was different from the usual. Its size was astonishing. Typically, adepts began with a small embryo, which they gradually developed and strengthened through years of persistent practice. But for James, it was different. His journey was just beginning, and his core was already superior to many. Keon looked at James with a slight grin. James turned out to be a real monster. It was a recognition of talent. It was time to leave this place. Keon remembered the difference between the two rituals, the white and the scarlet flame. The scarlet flame limited development. No matter how hard one tried, only one core could exist in the body. In the white flame ritual, upon reaching a certain level of mastery, the core was split into several smaller ones. These cores, acting synchronously, allowed for much more efficient collection and use of mana. Such cores were called stars. Arthur the Great was able to support 10 stars at once, a record that none of his descendants could approach. Keon talked about the achievements of his family members. He and his brother already had 6 stars, an impressive result. Cian, Seal, and Yod have only created 1 star each so far, although he's confident that the twins will reach the 2nd level within a year. Considering they started training at the age of 6, it took them 8 years. James will probably make the fastest progress, unless, of course, he starts to slack off from training. James felt an uncontrollable fire burning in his chest, a new body full of potential, a mana training technique, and most importantly, access to the ritual of the white flame, the legacy of the great Arthur himself. Even if 10 stars are unattainable, he will continue to improve every element of training. Rewrite it for himself. Make it better. James's gratitude was boundless for the opportunity left to Arthur's descendants. He would use it to the fullest. Keon was in a hurry to share James's learning successes with his brother. James was not going to rest. The maid, Nina, obediently carried out the order and returned holding Wynette's sword in her hands. James took up arms. He was going to use the knowledge he had gained. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and the mana he had learned to control began to flow into his palms, then into his sword. The steel rang, and the next moment the air trembled. A gust of wind struck from the center of the sword, knocking the maid off her feet. A voice rang out through the howling wind, ancient but painfully familiar. The voice belonged to the king of the wind spirits, Stormbringer. He recognized Harry. The soul, despite the new body, remained the same as it was in the distant past. "No one has summoned the storm sword for many years," At first, the spirit thought that he was facing Arthur's descendant, but the feeling of the soul dispelled all doubts. It was him. Pieces of the past came back to him. The main question that tormented Harry was why Arthur hadn't destroyed all the demon kings. Harry, who fought side by side until the end, wanted to know what happened after his death. Stormfur could not give a clear answer. The Wind Spirit King saw that last battle. The fight with the demonic King of Imprisonment was fierce but ended strangely. When all lay in ruins, only two remained standing. Arthur and the King of Imprisonment, the one who brought suffering and destruction. Arthur did not finish him off. He sheathed his sword and did not go to the castle of the King of Destruction. James couldn't contain his rage. He was tired of the omissions and lies. He remembered the rumors of a deal between Arthur and the King of Imprisonment, a deal that changed the course of history. The Wind King didn't know. He couldn't know. Even with his power, even with being there in the final moments of the battle, he didn't hear a single word. Everything happened after Arthur put the blade down. Everyone who could tell was dead. James's anger was seething. The disappointment in the spirit he had just awakened was almost physical. The gates between worlds began to close. James's current mana supply was insufficient for a full summoning. Petrel was drawn to the soul of an old ally, but could no longer maintain the connection. And then it was all gone. The whirlwind died down. James collapsed to the ground, exhausted and empty. The maid Nina ran up to James. James lay in bed, just waking up, his vision blurred and his temples pounding with pain. He understood that everything that had happened had taken too much of his strength. His meager supply of mana had been exhausted to the last drop. However, amidst all this pain, one thought became clear in my head, persistent, almost triumphant. Spirits remember living beings by their souls, and the King of the Wind Spirit recognized him. Not by body, not by name, but by the very being. It couldn't be a mistake. Until that moment, there had been a shadow of doubt inside him. But now, after the spirit's recognition, this thought disappeared. The hero of 300 years ago returned in a new body. Nina entered the room timidly, her voice trembling with excitement. She carefully asked if everything was okay. James, barely lifting his head from the pillow, chuckled and replied that everything was fine. He was surprised when he learned how much time had passed. It turned out he had slept for almost half a day. The others might be worried. Nina reported that the Patriarch and Keon were in the neighboring building and hurried to notify them of the awakening. Nina had already told everything. As soon as James pulled out his sword, a violent wind surrounded him. Apparently, it was impossible not to notice. Keon wanted to know if he had succeeded in summoning the spirit. James was silent for a moment. He knew he couldn't tell the whole truth. But there was no point in hiding everything either. He decided to reveal part of the truth. Said that the Wind Spirit King had appeared to him. The answer caused an immediate reaction. Even the Patriarch could not contain his surprise. No one had summoned the Spirit King since Arthur the Great. James confirmed this. The spirit itself had told him the same. However, he added that his powers were not yet sufficient. The spirit went back to its world, but promised to return when James became stronger. The Patriarch laughed with genuine admiration. His voice, usually stern and reserved, became lively and warm for a moment. He admitted that James is truly an amazing child. He was already aware of what happened in the Mana Well. James instantly sensed the energy flows and was able to form a core using the White Flame ritual. This result in itself was unimaginable, but now, added to it, James managed to attract the attention of the Spirit King himself. After a short rest, Keon had to start training with him again. The Patriarch had originally intended to leave this place after the ritual was completed. However, he now considered it more important to stay. James didn't want to take up too much of his and Keon's time, but the Patriarch immediately put an end to such thoughts. Keon will continue to be there as a mentor and guide, and in parallel they will also teach other students, Sane and Ciel. Even the Patriarch himself expressed a desire to participate in this process. He hoped that his success with James would become an incentive for the twins. Meanwhile, the twins themselves, Cian and Ciel, were in the training yard. The conversation between them turned to Eugene. Ciel mentioned that he had already opened his first star during the ritual. Zion knew this. It took them many years to achieve the same result. Brother objected that she was exaggerating. Even for the main line of the clan, reaching a star in a month was considered outstanding. But Eugene did it on the first day. It didn't fit into the usual framework of understanding. The twins continued sparring in silence, each carrying away their own thoughts about what was happening. Meanwhile, James himself was lying on the bed thinking. Then he reached for his sword, drew it from its sheath, and Sylph, a low-ranking wind spirit, appeared near the blade. He watched her with a hint of irony. That was all he could do with his current mana level. Communication with her, in James's opinion, was limited. Her intelligence did not allow for a full-fledged dialogue. James grinned and told her to tell the Wind King that if he lied, he would deal with him himself. The Sylph frowned, pouted, blew a little offended gust of wind at him and disappeared, dissolving into the air. James was the only one to die in the King of Imprisonment's castle. The rest of them didn't die. They were reborn, and now perhaps in the demon realm. My heart sank. The deal between Vermouth and the Demon King was a secret shrouded in darkness. And if anyone can shed light on the details, it's those who survived that battle, his former comrades. They could be in Helmet, or in Arot. Euros. Luchare. James knew he couldn't get there now. His body, no matter how gifted, was still that of a child. But that didn't change the main thing. One day he would go there. Time was on his side, and he wouldn't back down. James ran a hand through his hair, checking himself out in the mirror. A satisfied grin played across his face. The body had changed. Now the abs were clearly visible on the stomach. The shoulders were wider. The posture was straighter. Several years passed. He turned 17. Day after day he drove himself to exhaustion, training with fury, as if every movement could bring back what was lost. The white flame ritual left by Arthur allowed him to reach the 3rd star, a result that many have never achieved in their entire lives. This time he will not repeat the mistakes. He will study everything he rejected before. Near the estate, James and Cian were training. James announced that he was going to Aru to study magic. In the morning, as usual, he practiced the white flame ritual, and as a result, he had a 3rd star. Cian froze. It seemed impossible. He had trained for years, starting at 6, and was still struggling to maintain 2 stars. Cian didn't hide his irritation, but James waved it off. According to him, it was all explained simply. He was a genius. Cian reminded me of Yoda. Immediately after the blood inheritance ritual, Yod followed Master Roberian to Aru, hoping to become a tower apprentice. But he failed. Despite his connections and background, he could not prove his worth. For 4 years, Yod was nothing more than a servant among the mages, never receiving recognition. The story did not stop James. Also, the memory of Cian's sister also left him indifferent. She definitely won't miss him or worry about him. James went to the Patriarch to report on reaching the 3rd star and to ask permission to go to Arot. Cian couldn't take it anymore. He threw his sword to the ground and was left alone. The Patriarch, in the entire history of their family, had never seen anyone reach the 3rd star at such a young age. James made his case confidently. He sought to study magic in Aroth, hoping to discover new horizons and gain a deeper understanding of the nature of mana. The Patriarch gave his consent. However, he first set one condition: no dark magic. In Aroth there was a tower where dangerous witchcraft arts were practiced. Although public opinion no longer regarded them with the same horror, in the Leinhard family everything remained different. The descendants of Vermouth the Great were not allowed to even touch the darkness. It was part of their oath and heritage. Eugene accepted this condition easily. He had long felt disgust for the demonic arts. The promise was made and the way to Arot was open. James left the office and headed down the corridor. He had barely taken a few steps when there was a knock. The voice from behind the door was recognizable. Seal. She wanted to talk but flatly refused to go out, citing the fact that she smelled bad after training. Seal wanted to know if he was really leaving for Arot. Sheehan told her not only about James's plans, but also about his achievement, the 3rd star. Ciel did not understand why he had to travel so far. After all, he already has a talent for spiritual magic, and if he lacks knowledge, he can hire a teacher from the capital. She tried to persuade him to stay, even offering to become his sparring partner again, but James did not agree. He had to go, and nothing could change that decision. Ciel thought about Gerard and worried about how he would cope without him. James assured that his father had settled in well and had even lost weight thanks to hunting. Her concern extended to Uncle Keon, and especially to Cian, who she said looked depressed after their conversation. But that didn't change his mind. James wished her luck in her training and walked away. Ciel looked out into the corridor. She didn't want to let him go either. In a spacious room of the estate with high windows, on which heavy red curtains swayed, stood James. His father sat in the chair, as if inscribed in the calm of this noble interior. He had changed greatly. James listened to his father's final instructions. His father reminded him to stay out of trouble in Arata and not to neglect his studies. In response, James asked him to remember to take care of himself, even when he was not around. The father chuckled and, standing up, noted with slight surprise that James had already grown taller than him. He only smiled reservedly. As he was leaving, he wished him to take care of himself. In a sunlit clearing not far from the shimmering portal, everyone gathered to say goodbye to James. The patriarch, holding back his excitement, was afraid whether James would cope without security. James assured everyone that he could hold his own, a confidence that was bolstered by his achievement of 3 stars. The looks on the faces of those gathered were full of sadness, and James felt the weight of farewell. His father couldn't hold back his tears, although he had been holding back before. But despite the smile he tried to portray, tears still rolled down his cheeks. James sighed with a little sadness and smiled too. He turned around, waved goodbye, and stepped through the portal. Ahead lay the capital of the Kingdom of Magicians, Arat, the Pentagon. 5 majestic magical towers formed a perfect pentagon, as if outlining the boundaries of the capital of the Kingdom of Magicians. In the very center of this symbolic pattern stood a dazzling castle, the heart of Arata, the capital of the Kingdom of Magicians. Flying carriages were hovering over the city. James, having just arrived, climbed into one and soared upward. He had been here before in his past life, but even a fleeting glance was enough to notice how much the Pentagon had changed. Now, floating stations towered here, unique aerial platforms, connected to the ground and to each other by teleportation gates suspended in the air. Many different magics were used to keep the structure at such a height. A young man sat nearby, his guide. There were a total of 15 hover stations in the Pentagon, each one designed by Sandy Mudra. James nodded, mildly surprised. Even the flying chariots were her creation. James interrupted the guide and expressed a desire to head to Sandy Wise's estate. The decision was met with approval. The place was considered a must-see for anyone visiting the Pentagon. Besides this, the list of must-see attractions included magical towers and a night view of the city. The guide continued to talk about Sandy, the youngest tower builder in the history of the kingdom. A statue was erected in her honor, which became the symbol of the Green Magic Tower. 200 years ago, she disappeared, leaving behind only a short message saying that she needed rest. Despite numerous attempts by her students to find even a hint of her traces, everything turned out to be in vain. It may be just a guess, but he is convinced that Sandy is heading to Helmet, the demon world she once set foot in. It was there, 100 years before her disappearance, that she lost her companion, Harry the Reckless, and returned alone. Sandy couldn't let go of this loss, because in the last moments before his death, Harry confessed his love to Sandy. James was clearly taken aback by hearing such an emotional and personal version of Sandy Wise's disappearance that concerned him. There are other theories, too. Sandy the Wise has always been vocal in her opposition to the existence of the demonic Dark Tower. Until her disappearance, she remained a staunch opponent of dark magic and its spread in the kingdom of Arat. It is speculated that those who were behind the construction of the Dark Tower are responsible for its disappearance. However, James immediately rejected this version. None of the dark magicians were strong enough to harm the great Sandy. The guide seemed to share his opinion and offered a more compelling explanation. If Sandy really was interfering with the Demon King Helmet, existing in the shadows through his connection to the Dark Tower, he had a strong motive to eliminate her. Sandy's power and influence could become a threat to his plans. The carriage landed softly at the foot of the majestic building. James stepped out, looking out over Sandy's monumental estate. The place was bustling. People were standing at the entrance. Some were kneeling, some were clutching amulets. Many were whispering prayers. The guide explained that most of these people were candidates for training in the magic towers, but their financial capabilities did not allow them to stay here for long. Even a view of Sandy's estate cost tens of thousands, and a full visit was several times more expensive. James was surprised by such a high price. But the guide explained that there was a myth that if you pray in front of Sandy's portrait, you will be able to pass any entrance exam. Approaching the entrance, James showed his documents. On them was written the name Family Lionheart. The knights, recognizing him, bowed respectfully and opened the gates. The guide remained outside, wishing them a pleasant visit. He took a step forward, looking up. Now he would find out how this girl lived. James walked slowly down the wide, silent corridor. According to legend, she spent hundreds of years here, far from the hustle and bustle of the outside world. Old memories came to mind. Sandy talked about how sooner or later everyone needs to find something of their own, something real. Harry admitted that he never really thought about it. Tommy, on the other hand, even declared that he would become king. A crazy dreamer. There is little desire, but who is stopping you from dreaming? Sandy wanted a simple life. She wanted to get married, have a child, grow old, become a grandmother. James looked at Sandy's portrait. She should have met a decent man instead of being alone in these cold walls. The porter's voice, unexpectedly sharp, brought him back to reality. Touching things was strictly forbidden. A moment filled with memories was ruined. After all, he didn't come here for the sake of reflection, but with a specific goal. His real goal is the library. The halls were endless. The shelves went up. The air was filled with the dry aroma of dusty pages and magical ink. Somewhere around here, Sandy could have left something important, a clue, a lead. James glanced over the rows of books, hesitant to break the rules. Touching the exhibits was strictly prohibited. But all that was left was to study the names and hope that at least one of them would give a clue. Memories came flooding back. A necklace with rewritten memories. It was not registered in the official treasury. The necklace was simply lying in a pile of old artifacts, a random, forgotten item that he had stumbled upon almost by accident. Just as Petrel recognized him in his new body, the necklace could react not to his appearance, but to his soul. My rebirth was clearly not a mere coincidence. If this was all connected to Sandy, if she really was involved in my return, then she couldn't have just disappeared. The library, the bedroom, dozens of rooms. I went around everything, but still didn't find a single hint. Thoughts are confused. Not a single clue, not a single guess. Empty. If there was anything important, there would have been at least a trace. Let her show up in person if something doesn't suit her. And if not, then she's really dead. James left. Night had already fallen. The guide was still waiting, hiding his anger behind a smile after a long wait. The next goal is the Red Tower of the Magi. After that, you can say goodbye to the guide. The carriage soared into the sky over the night city again. The conversation turned to his brother, Yoda Linehord. His name is known to all the young magicians of the Pentagon. Yod had been here for 4 years. James was indebted to the Red Tower for that. He wanted to hear the rumors that he was being surrounded. The guide was visibly frightened at the mere mention of Yoda. They say he often had fun outside the Red Tower. Yoda is 19, only 2 years older than James. At his age, it's normal to indulge in pleasures. But rumors say it wasn't just fun. The name of the succubus was whispered. The guide was embarrassed. Yod had fun with the demons from the Dark Tower. The Pentagon is home to not only magicians but also demons, especially near the Dark Tower, which stands on the outskirts. Roughly speaking, Yod sought solace in passion. Every city has its place of shadows and vices. Even in Aroth there is an alley for dark deeds. James asked where to look for the alley with the succubi. The place is called Bolero. It only opens on a full moon. James didn't want to get close to Yod. He had enough of his own worries. But hearing about his connection with a succubus made his blood boil. Lanehart's eldest son and a demoness? That was too much. The guide was scared and begged James to keep it a secret. James promised not to tell anyone, not even Yoda himself. Until there is evidence, there is no reason to slap. But at the full moon, he himself will look into Bolero. The carriage continued its journey above the Pentagon at night. Moonlight reflected from the rooftops. The city below slumbered. At the threshold of the tower, James was met by a girl in a pointed red hat. She introduced herself as a magician from the Red Tower. The master was waiting for him, but on the top floor a problem arose. There was an explosion from above. Something had happened. The Red Tower is known for its summoning magic, where there are many failures. The demons burst out of the broken window, but were caught by red hands. Laughter was heard. This was Roberian's magic. The students summoned the shadow beasts from the Lebeshag Circle. Real fools. The creatures could not be missed. They were crazy about destruction. Hunting them in the capital would be a disaster. The teenagers apologized and asked for forgiveness. The disciples were thrown out of the tower. There is no more room for them in the tower. Roberian saw James and went downstairs. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. James had grown a lot since that meeting. James recognized Roberian. He had hardly changed. The magic of rejuvenation works wonders. This Roberian is stronger than he was 5 years ago. Thanks to his mana training, James could see that he was damn strong. But Sandy is still not his equal. For the Tower Master, the level is decent. Glade had already reported James. Roberian realized that James was interested in learning magic. Magic is a fascinating but difficult art. The gates of the building opened, and Yod Leinhard's groan was heard. Yod, in his thoughts, laughed at his brother and the demonesses. James will try to establish a relationship with Yod. Roberian ordered his brother to occupy himself with reading. The gates were closed. The master of the tower apologized for the spectacle. They discussed Glade's letter and training. James did not want to study with Roberian to avoid rumors. He chose to study on his own. Roberian agreed not to interfere. Roberian did not impose expectations and promised not to interfere with the training. If necessary, James could turn to Gera. The Red Tower became James's temporary home. It was not as luxurious as the Leinhard estate, but it was serviceable. James immediately wanted to get into the library. A month had passed since his arrival at the Red Tower. Every day he visited the library without fail. Early in the morning he read books. Late in the evening he returned to his room. Magic did not take up all his time. Before reading, he trained his mana and body. Sleep was rare, but a strong body helped to recover. He had read absolutely every book in the local library. It was time to move on. 300 years ago, Sandy created the perfect method of mana control. The method was based on twisting mana into a circle. As the mana increased, the circle grew in size. This method spread throughout the capital. Most magicians still use magic circles. The exception is the mages of spirits and dark magic. Their methods of mana management are completely different. James opened the door. Hera was standing in the room. Time to start. Everything as usual with the mana circle. The circle is still the most effective method, but James decided to change the usual structure. He wanted to mix magic with Leinhardt's method. Hera doubted it. It was dangerous and unstable. Mana magic and martial arts are incompatible. Mana explosion can kill on failure. James didn't back down. He was willing to take risks. He read every book in the library. Hera understood. Young age and stubbornness. She allowed it, but promised to intervene if it failed. The responsibility would fall on both her and the master. James nodded. Time to begin. Hera was ready to stop the magic at any moment. James glowed. Mana swirled around his body. The circle and the ritual are different paths, but the same essence. He added stars to the magic circle. The mana grew stronger, surged, obeying every impulse. A mistake could be fatal, but he maintained control. Hera gasped. The youth controlled the mana flawlessly. The flow did not dissipate. He held it with his willpower. A fireball burst into flames in James's hand. The flame transformed into a purple magic projectile. He grasped the essence of magic and improved its form. The speed of casting a spell was astonishing. James asked for a challenge. He needed an opponent. Hera summoned the Cabrium Golem. Solid as a rock, yet motionless, a perfect target, James prepared to attack with a new spell. The blow landed precisely. A hole gaped in the golem's chest. The magic circle flared up in the ritual of the white flame. There was no flaw in the density or purity of the mana. The spell's power surpassed that of a third circle mage. Using martial arts for the circle is madness. It is not a talent. It is a frightening miracle. 3 white flame stars are the equivalent of the third circle. James left in the morning, saying he had plans. The Tower Master thought about writing a letter of recommendation. Access to Acreon is a privilege for the chosen few. He completed the course in a month. Incredible. The spell pierced the golem right through. Roberian will write a letter. Such talent should not vegetate. Let the envious stew in their own impotence. James was going to meet a friend, even though he hardly knows the city. Murden Square. Sandy's statue towers over the crowd. Sandy's smile is frozen in stone. He looks at the city with his usual smug grin. James stops in front of the monument. Gargus emerges from the crowd, massive, strong, too old for his age. One is tall and broad-shouldered, the other is fit and focused. Old friends meet again with renewed vigor. Eugene has grown up, but Gargus looks like an old man. Strength is judged in the handshake. Their hands are squeezed in a short but powerful gesture. The family potion is back in business. Father is already hooked. Gargus's muscles don't show years of training. The small bottle glitters in the sun. I'm tired of it. James looks away. A dark title floats in the air. Bolero. Dark alleys, suspicious rumors, whispers behind your back. Bolero auction site, giant egg target. An egg of strange origin. Gargus sees in the purchase part of a future potion. Money jingles, but it is not enough. Mighty Gargus kneels. A request without pride. Eugene reluctantly agrees, glancing at the passers-by. The auction is ahead. The secrets are thickening. Eugene isn't interested in weapons, since he already has Veneth's sword. His attention is drawn to Bolero Street itself. He recently encountered Yoda in the Red Tower. He looked like he was going through withdrawal from the inside. Another full moon is already on the doorstep. Yod will not be able to resist and will go to Bolero again. This place becomes a trap for the possessed. Eugene is ready to follow his brother into the dark corners. All roads lead to Bolero. Roberian calls James immediately after his return. James is pleased. He has questions about Yoda. The master's office is filled with a magical atmosphere. They sit opposite each other at the table. The magician bewitches the papers. The documents fly to James. Among them is a letter of recommendation to Acreon. The royal library is famous throughout Arat. Even the best towers cannot compare to its archives. James admits that he hasn't reached that level yet. Roberian believes that now is the best time for him. As long as his mind is flexible, he can master anything. Even a cursory reading will provide an incredible foundation. Acreon is not just a library, but a gateway to transformation. The knowledge of the ancients can change James himself. His magic is already impressive, but this is only the beginning. Acreon is a repository of knowledge from the mythical era. The works of the greatest philosophers of antiquity are collected there. James hopes to find Mrs. Sandy's notes. The originals of her works are indeed kept at Acreon. The magical craft is the pinnacle of magical knowledge. These books have been kept since her passing, but remain in Acreon. In the towers there are only copies. In Acreon there are only originals. Access to them is the rarest privilege of a magician. The first volume of the magic craft has already been published en masse, but the original is kept only there. For James, this is enough to make him forget the other books. After reading the first part, magic seemed like a simple game to Roberian. The letter does not guarantee access to the Acreon library, but Roberian is going to send a letter of recommendation anyway. It is decided. The letter will be sent. It's high time to ask about your brother. Immediately after arriving in the capital, James learned that Yod was having fun with succubi instead of studying. Roberian reacts sadly to the news of his brother. Yoda was warned several times, but it was impossible to keep track of him. Previously, succubi sucked life out of people by killing them. After the war, Queen Helmida forbade them from killing. Succubi still suck souls, but they don't kill. That doesn't excuse Yoda's irresponsible behavior. Yod left his family 4 years ago. There were high hopes for him, but he did not live up to expectations. The training in the tower did not yield results. The high status added pressure to Yoda, and it broke him. The pressure on Yoda only increased as time went on. To help him, Roberian suggested some fun, having warned him in advance not to go too far. But Yoda's consciousness had changed. James is no stranger to pressure, having lived on the main estate for several years. With the brash Tionis, the cunning Anisila, the talented Cian and Seal all around, Yod was constantly under heavy pressure. He stays in the tower because it is easier for him here than in his own family. They understand that Yoda is in trouble, but running to the succubi is too much. Demons remained enemies. It is impossible to coexist with people. I need to find out for myself what happened to Yod. At the full moon on Bolero Alley, Gargus and James wear capes. Disguise is mandatory. Children of noble families must not be recognized. If someone finds out, rumors immediately start spreading. They're already there, monitoring the device within Bolero. He'll report as soon as he sees Yoda. Doubts arise that Yod can disguise himself, but he does not use transformation magic. Yod always wears the same cloak, so it won't be hard to find. Anger and resentment towards Yoda for his reputation filled James. It was decided that we would first visit the auction with Gargus, and then we would deal with him later. The auction at Bolero Alley is held anonymously. Everyone is in a separate room. No one knows the identity of the others. 3 buttons for betting: blue. Place a bet: yellow. Increase the bet: red. Call for help. Gargus and James are sitting on the couch, preparing for the auction. Gargus is surprised by James's participation in the auction. A masked man appears on the screen, announcing lots of valuable magical items from Helmet. The bidding promises to be intense. Rare and powerful artifacts will attract the attention of all magicians. The first lot is the Horn of Balarex. The starting bid is 10 million sell. Bidding begins. Protion fruit, mandrake root, and uspak bud are rare ingredients for the potion. The friends discuss the stupid spider and its venom. The toxin is prized among magicians. When the giant egg, the main lot of the auction, appears, everyone is waiting for its appearance. Next lot. Unknown metal from Khazar Hills has been looking for owners for a long time, but is of little use. The metal shines in the moonlight, but cannot be worked and does not store mana. The lot is a beautiful metal that diffuses the moonlight. The starting price is 1 million sell. James made a bet, exactly 1 million sell, an unexpected find in this place. The Moonlight Blade is a powerful weapon capable of destruction. A legendary weapon with dangerous power. A fragment of the blade was found in the Khazar Hills in a dungeon. Arthur's idea is to return the blade to the place where it was sealed. The blade only accepted Arthur. His swings caused destruction. Arthur may have broken the blade into small pieces, losing his strength. The fragment is empty. There is no strength. James gets a call. Yod has arrived. Time to leave. He leaves the card for betting. In the square there is a Rafflesia store on the north side of Bolero Avenue. This is where Yod spends his time. Demons there are a meeting with enemies from a past life, before they would have already been killed. Access costs 2 million sell, includes a session and sleep. The client agrees. The basement is a place for dreams with drinks for relaxation. Yod is somewhere nearby. We need to find him quickly. You don't need alcohol. You need a path. Her smile hides something. It leads to a basement room. Fear and uncertainty. This is the first time. Succubi promise only a drop of energy and slight weakness. The basement is a dark place. James just wants to take a nap, pays for the drink without change. Something is wrong with him, according to the succubi. He is looking for a way out, a shortcut to the nearest restaurant. James devours the meat greedily, as if he is starving to the limit. Here comes Yod. 2 demons are carrying Yod. He can barely stand on his feet, squeezed out like a lemon. Anger boiled in his chest. James could not forgive Yoda for the shame of the Linehorde family. He was dragged out of the building and onto a deserted night street, the shadows of the buildings hiding James as he followed the trail. The demons and Yod disappeared into an old, dilapidated building. James tried to slip inside, but 3 figures blocked his way. The stench, the dampness, and a heavy gaze from the darkness. A rough voice, and someone's hand closed around James's throat. An instant blow, and the thug fell without moving. 2 men emerged from the darkness with weapons in their hands. The sword flashed, the dagger darted, and all in vain. James scattered the attackers with lightning speed. 3 bodies lay on the floor, showing no signs of life. All were unconscious. There were no answers. James just snorted and moved on. He would find out the answer himself. The wooden door shook from the kick. A sharp, chemical smell hit my nose. It stank of drugs, disgusting. Iodine seemed to be more addicted than the demons. In the corner, a figure with an animal's head looked straight at him. The creature was surprised. The guards did not stop the guest. There were demons nearby, quite a bunch. A demon, a drug addict, and a beastman. Racial tolerance as it is, the beastman ordered James to be eliminated. Magic flared in James's palms and struck without warning, sending all 3 of them crashing to the floor before they could react. James looked around, not expecting an answer from them. Yod was still here somewhere, so he would have to look for it himself. He raised his sword. The air vibrated with wind magic. The 1st and 2nd floors were combed, empty. Only the 3rd floor remains. The finger flared with energy. The direction was indicated. The ceiling shattered from the magical blow. He flew up through a hole in the ceiling. Only 1 room, so he was there. A wave of dark magic erupted from behind the door. The pocket artifact glowed in the air. The Moonlight Blade fragment came to life. Mana absorption is not so useless. There was darkness coming from within. The magic was black. It was supposed to kill James, but the protection worked. A useful trinket, even though it was only a fragment of the Moonlight Blade. Dark magic was a taboo he knew about. Glade Linehorde had strictly forbidden it, but he is his own son, a descendant of Arthur, a black magician, a disgrace. The mage can run, James. He won't chase him. He doesn't want to see this servant in front of him. White flames enveloped James's body like a lion's mane. The magic of the circle and 3 stars was activated. There was a flash of darkness behind him as 2 demons emerged from the shadows. James recognized them as Yoda's companions. Demonic clones, not even worth words. James challenged them to battle without hesitation. They growled, filled with rage. James's command was given, attack, an explosion of power, and the battle began. His sword flashed, cutting through flesh and bone. The demons rushed into battle but lost limbs. Arms flew up like shreds of paper. One was cut in half, the other followed. Magic raged around, subjugated to the will. The battle was over in a matter of moments. Their bodies fell and the darkness dissipated. Victory was James's, with no chance of response. James gave the mage an angry look. The servant recognized James, but he contemptuously rejected the pathetic magician. The servant begged, but no one listened to him. Fury and fear flared up inside the mage. The staff rose. The spell flew to the target. A wave of darkness rushed towards James. James's sword cut through the magic like air. James walked forward without slowing down. Panic was reflected in the servant's eyes. How could he so easily fight off the darkness? Sweat rolled down the mage's face. James was in front of him in a split second, cold metal touching his throat. Any movement and blood will flow. The magician froze, unable to utter a word. James sheathed his sword and entered the room. Yod lay motionless on the bed. The walls were covered with animal bones. In the center of the room stood a bowl with something blue. James recognized the object as a demonic ritual cup and was intrigued by the contents inside. The answer came from the ghostly servant. In the cup was the heart of a unicorn. Unicorns are water deities, the embodiment of mana. Their hearts are more valuable than human ones in sacrifices. James realized where this was going. Someone was trying to make a deal with the Demon King. The servant quickly justified himself, hiding his fear. Baron Helmid, Ulfer's master, needed this. These were the subordinates of the Duchess of Jebel Noir, the Night Witch, who is already over 300 years old. In Helmid there is chaos, destruction, and lawlessness. Jebella is inferior to the Demon King, but still dangerous. The title of Duchess of Hell speaks for itself. Yod was about to make a deal with the incubus. Jebella's minion is another demonic abomination. And all this is in a state of alcohol and drug intoxication. For the ritual he used the heart of a unicorn. Sacrifice, in exchange for power. The servant could not stand it. He fell to his knees. He was only following Master Yoda's orders. His voice trembled. Fear pierced through him. The money for the heart of the unicorn was given by Yod himself. The servant made excuses. He could not disobey the order. James smiled coldly. Of course he couldn't. The joy of the future reward clouded his mind. The elder Lanehart paid his way into the demonic deal, all for the sake of making a contract with the incubus. If successful, Ulfer promised immeasurable power, energy you never even dreamed of. But you didn't stop and went further. The deal with Jebella was the last straw. Greed clouded your eyes and mind. Don't hide behind orders. You chose this yourself. Your chance to survive is to shut up and be silent. Don't even think of blaming others for your sins. Sweat was running down his face. The servant could barely breathe. James walked up to the body on the bed. A sharp blow, a loud slap. Yod jerked and opened his eyes. He slowly recognized James. Consciousness returned with the pain. With fear in his eyes, fear Yod did not understand what James was doing here. James had been watching him from afar only because he wanted to help. Hearing that he was going through a tough time, he tried to understand, even to support. Small joys distracted from the pain, but dark magic is a line that cannot be crossed. The heir of the Linehearts and the contract with the incubus, a disgrace unacceptable for the main branch of the family. Yod made excuses. He was powerless. James hit him with his forehead furiously. A loud cry of pain. Yod did not expect it. Yod is just pathetic and weak. He made a deal without thinking about the consequences. His soul would belong to a demon. He would carry out any orders of the master. Kill if ordered. Die if ordered. A pathetic dog on a leash, that's the bottom line. James looked coldly at Yoda. This is not the end. Dark magic is a stain on the whole family. If the demon ordered to kill relatives or steal from the Lanehart treasury, Yod tried to justify himself. Supposedly there are limits. He promised not to violate his principles. James grinned. Words are worth nothing. He made oaths with an incubus on his little fingers. Demons don't give a damn about principles. Disobey. Prepare to die. James did not believe. Yod is not one of them. He called Yod a pathetic fugitive. Drugs, women, these are Yoda's choices. Yoda's head bowed, silence. Then the anger flared up. It exploded. James didn't know the whole truth. He can't judge him. 4 years ago, James's adoption came as a blow. His father focused all his attention on his new son. Yod felt rejected and forgotten, but James did not accept these accusations. Yoda had a chance, the white flame ritual. He was called to the magic tower of Arat. James looked at him without pity. You didn't lose because of your father, because of yourself. The advantage is not in love, but in character. Talent is only a small part of the path. Qian and Ciel continue to train every day. And you drown yourself in alcohol and demonic games. You hope to become a patriarch through darkness and drugs. Yod rejected his family. He chose the path of a dark magician. He no longer wants to be an heir. His goal is Helmet, a country without prejudice, where darkness is considered a strength, not a disgrace. He dreams that he will finally be accepted there. The blow sent Yod flying off the bed. Blood covered his face, his nose broken. James's anger flared up again. Arthur's descendant, on his knees before demons. Family honor betrayed for Helmet's recognition. James despised him for that choice. Yod was nothing without the name Lanehart. Fear distorted Yoda's face. He heard each reproach as if it were a sentence. He had it all, and he had wasted it all. On his knees before darkness and lust. James refused to listen to him any longer. He ordered the guards to take the servant away. Cold gaze, without pity. Roberian, master of the Red Tower, appeared in the room. Yod cowered in fear, trying to justify himself. He denied that he had become a dark magician. Roberian did not believe it. The attempt was already a crime. Yod desecrated the family name and the trust of the mentors. Master Glade believed him. Now he is a disgrace to everyone. Yod betrayed everyone who taught and protected him. Yod insisted that it was a mistake. Roberian warned that excuses would not save him. He was ready to use force, with pleasure if Yod did not stop lying. The last chance was to repent before the teachers. Yod began to tear his hair out. Panic flooded his mind. He fell to his knees. It's over. A cry of despair sounded. After midnight, the four gathered in Arata. Roberian invited Glaith and Tionis to Arat. They sat silently, with sad faces. They had learned everything. The silence was broken by a knock on the door. The door creaked. An unknown person entered. A man in a dark robe. His steps were measured. He introduced himself. Balzac Ludbeth, master of the Dark Tower, a name that inspires fear. One of the 3 legendary dark magicians. He signed a contract with the King of Imprisonment. His smile was cold and frightening. The darkness seemed to move behind him. Tension hung in the room. The air thickened. Tionis greeted the guests with a hard look. Roberian tried to calm the tension in the room. The master of the Dark Tower denied any connection to the incident. Tionis was dubious, remembering the previous accusations. There was mistrust and mutual recriminations in the air. The magician Gavid was named, the real culprit of what happened. The fault of the Mages Guild, not the Tower, is now on the agenda. Balzac has taken responsibility for what happened. A century ago, dark magic was punishable by death without trial. Now people have the freedom to choose their own path. Arthur's name brought back memories of the contract. The atmosphere was tense. Every word and look carried the weight of the family's fate. Dark magic and dealings with demons are no longer a crime. The Lanehart family was urged to respect and not to overstep their boundaries. The words sounded like an attempt to preserve the family's dignity. The desire to avoid a new war was the main reason for the visit. The blame was taken on himself, to prevent stupid consequences. Drug violations are transferred to the hands of the Arata Law Enforcement Agency. Drug dealers and succubi will face severe punishment. A brutal reprisal has been announced against anyone who has contact with Gavid. Torture and death are the price for betraying your family and enslaving Master Yoda. The atmosphere is tense with determination and threats of justice. The candles have gone out, and the room is dark and tense. The Demon King of Imprisonment conveyed important words. Light emerged from the hand of the leader of the Dark Tower, and the letters shone in the air. The decision to execute Ulfar Hoen, the enemy of the dear descendants of dear Arthur. This angered James, who was offended by the lack of tact towards Arthur's family. Glade also did not hide his indignation and sadness. The apologies and promise of support from the Dark Tower were insistent. The hope for a peaceful next meeting remained in wishes. Glade was depressed and asked James to leave them. The head admitted guilt for raising his son, which manifested itself in Yoda's problems. Robertian insisted that he was the one who was too demanding of the boy. Glade decided to return Yoda to the Lionheart estate for correction. Tionis was shocked, doubting the necessity of such a decision. Yod did not become a dark magician and is ready to correct himself, Glade insisted. No one from the main line of Lionheart had ever turned to dark magic. Glade's decision was final and not subject to discussion. Yoda's kinship did not give him the right to defile the family's honor. Yod's life at the estate would be hard and harsh, Tionis insisted. Ciel and Cian were left in the dark about the family's affairs. Yod no longer has a place in the Lionheart residence. He must remain in Arata against his family's wishes. There have been accusations of inaction in the Yoda case, unlike Anasil and her children. Glade insisted that no one singled out the children. Yoda was sent to study in Eret as he wanted. It was necessary to make sure that Roberian took Yod as a student by any means possible. If Yod shied away, a mentor was needed to control him. Thionis faces the stigma of Yod's return and is willing to take Yod back to her estate to protect him from her family. The decision on where to live is a personal matter between Yod and his mother. Glade is upset but is willing to support the choice if Yod agrees. James walked out into the long hallway, his footsteps echoing off the empty walls. Suddenly, the master of the dark magic tower appeared in the shadows and offered to talk. The situation was tense, and conversation with James was not going well. James immediately rejected the master of the dark tower, calling him a lackey of the demon. 300 years have passed, and the relationship between the Lionhearts and the dark mages remains tense. The master expressed regret. He asked not to transfer the hatred of dark magic to him. The Dark Tower wizard acknowledged James's merits at the blood testing ceremony and had heard of his successes. He noted James's impressive results in magic in recent years. James received a letter of recommendation to Acreon Academy. The magician warned that one recommendation from the Red Tower was not enough. Other masters may reject James due to lack of qualifications. The mage offered to write a letter of recommendation from the Dark Tower for James. James didn't understand why a black magician would go to extremes for the sake of a letter. The master of the Dark Tower admired James's talent and admitted that he did not get along well with the master of the Red Tower. The master wanted the student's support to soften his attitude towards him. It was also a chance to impress the Lionheart family. James agreed to accept the letter of recommendation, but he warned that there would be no friendship between them. The main thing for the master is to change James's opinion of the Dark Tower for the better. The master finished his speech by apologizing for wasting his time. James asked if the master had anything to do with his brother's fate. The master was proud to be a dark magician. Incompetent magicians insult dark magic by their existence. Even Lionheart wouldn't have gotten support with such weak knowledge. James considered Yoda a pathetic parody of a human being. James sat in front of the bowl of unicorn hearts, looking at them thoughtfully. Glade said that James deserved the heart of a unicorn for saving Yoda. The heart can be used in many ways, but the easiest way is to absorb its mana. The mana is almost pure, without any taint of corruption, despite the nature of the creature. James placed his hand on his heart and mana began to spread throughout his body. He planned to acquire the 4th star before he was 20, a rare achievement. No one in the Lionheart family had ever reached the 4th star before reaching adulthood. The Patriarch and Kion each had 6 stars, the pinnacle of power in the world. James decided to make every effort to reach the 5th star. He wanted to improve the White Flame ritual with all his strength, because it was created by his friend. Gargus said the giant testicles cost him 30 million seals. He was in a hurry to pay before midnight, otherwise another participant would take them. James wondered why Gargus was so attached to those testicles. At the Pentagon Bank, James gave a government black card for payment. They left the bank and walked back, waiting for confirmation of payment and delivery. Gargus joked about the possibility of seeing giant testicles in all their glory. James didn't understand why he had to travel so far for eggs, but he agreed to go. He wanted to see how Gargus would use the Scarlet Flame ritual and compare it to the white one. In the crowd, James noticed a girl with unnaturally purple hair, Sandy. He rushed after her, feeling that he could not be mistaken in this sign. He came within a meter of her and stopped, not knowing what to say. Cindy hadn't changed in 300 years, but he looked completely different. He thought she wouldn't recognize him. Harry, reborn in the body of Arthur's descendant. He imagined that she would push him away with words and abuse. He tried to grab her hand, but it went right through her. He was shocked. It wasn't a ghost, but a magical hologram. Sandy looked at him, smiled, and disappeared into thin air. He felt joy. He had found her, and she had found him. With a smile on his face, he walked on. James stood on the balcony and looked out over the square. He thought that Sandy was alive and was looking for him. He was tormented by the question, how could she recognize him, perhaps like the petrel that recognized his soul or noticed the pendant? He knew that Sandy knew about his rebirth, but since she sent a hologram, it meant that she couldn't come herself. Her body was probably unable to move. James wondered if she had done it on her own or if a spell had been cast on her. A darker version is also possible, the intervention of the demonic king of imprisonment. Now James realized what had happened. Sandy had found him, and now it was his turn. Gargus called out to him and asked where he had suddenly rushed off to, but it was none of his business, and they continued on their way. Gargus offered to show the Scarlet Flame ritual since James was interested. He tore his shirt, which was unnecessary. This, he said, helped him to better tune into the magic and begin the ritual. Fiery tongues of flame surrounded Gargus as he performed the ritual. With Scarlet Flame, the core of magic is split, as in white magic. The members of the main branch always left the nucleus intact and did not split it. Gargus's ancestors were able to multiply the core to 5 stars over many years. Few of the collateral families achieved such results with magic. Gargus was proud that he already had 2 stars on his core. In 300 years, his family had achieved a maximum of 5 stars. The white flame ritual is only available to the main branch of the family. The scarlet flame is studied and used by all other branches of the family. There is a great gulf of envy between the main branch and the rest. Arthur could not be called a greedy fool despite his decisions. James wanted to study the Scarlet Flame ritual but found it to be ineffective. Gargus wondered why James refused to see the giant eggs. James went to the basement of the Red Tower where his research room was located. Sandy's notes in Acreon may have held clues to the magic. Roberian and the Master of the Dark Tower gave letters of recommendation for access to the library. James knew that Sandy had been waiting for him for 300 years and promised not to let her down. Moonlight Blade destroys mana, but one piece is not enough for powerful enchantments. James could work with minor spells and wanted to try his hand. If he can handle the shard, it means his mana is stronger than the White Flame ritual. Hera was surprised by the explosions in the research room that she had been hearing for several days. She decided to check the situation and pass on the order from the Master of the Red Tower. When she went downstairs, she found James in the dust. James has been practicing mana enhancement and magic training without a magic circle. Hera noticed a fragment around which the walls and floor were covered with cracks and fractures. James directed the force at the wall, which immediately collapsed. He used the core as a magic circle and strengthened his connection with mana. Practice combat magic techniques, combining a fireball and a magic projectile. He focused on controlling his mana and could now gather it into a clot of energy. Created an explosion from the collected mana, controlling the power and avoiding previous mistakes. Hera was afraid that he might get hurt due to the noise and intense training. She came to convey that the Tower Master wishes to see James. Roberian was waiting for him in the Royal Library of Acreon. Pentagon is the capital of Arata, the center of which is formed by 5 towers in the shape of a pentagon. In the center of the pentagon stands the Abram Palace, surrounded by a large lake. The palace can only be reached by boat. The lake and the palace are protected by a demonic seal placed by Sandy. The seal symbolizes friendship with the royal family of Arata and remains valid for hundreds of years. Since arriving in Arat, magic still seems impossible for James to comprehend on such a scale. The gates of the palace are open only to the highest nobility and masters of the magic tower. Masters are forbidden to use magic inside the palace, except for the royal family and palace mages who are sworn to the oath. Masters serve the royal family, but are not obligated to follow unreasonable orders. The magic towers in Arat are bound by an agreement of mutual cooperation. The parliament, rather than the palace, maintains a closer relationship with the magic towers. The palace has its own magical alliance. The tower masters work exclusively with the parliament, not with the palace. There is no hostility between magicians, they cooperate. 3 masters spoke out against James's entry into Acreon: the Blue Tower, the Green Tower, and the Mages Guild. To access Acreon, you need to get permission from these 3 masters. At this point, the conversation ended, with wishes of good luck to James and a request not to be nervous. James entered the hall where the Tower Masters were gathered. He bowed before them, acknowledging their status and authority. He saw the captain of the Palace Mages, Tremple Wizard, Masters of the Red Magic Tower, Roberian Serpus, Master of the Green Magic Tower of Generic Osman, Master of the Blue Magic Tower, Heridoth Uzlan, Master of the White Magic Tower, Malkid Erishaya, Master of the Dark Magic Tower, Balzac Ludbeth, Master of the Mages Guild, Edgar Jaren. James stands in the center of the room. Hanin Abram watches from above, his gaze bright and focused. He is the first in line of succession and the pride of the royal family, having reached 5 stars before reaching adulthood. All heads turn to James, the young swordsman and mage. The name of Eugene Lanehart was heard more and more often at the tower meetings. Robertian and Balzac defend James, considering him a worthy candidate. Some masters doubt how a 17-year-old could receive a recommendation to Acreon. Sword and magic are incompatible in their understanding. James feels the tension. The master's looks are full of suspicion and hidden motives. In their opinion, the master of the Red Tower is friends with the Patriarch. His position is predictable. The master of the Dark Tower is trying to strengthen ties with the Lanehart family. This is an attempt to avoid the consequences of the incident. James is asked to demonstrate his abilities before the High Council. One of the mages mentions that it would be nice to see some research work. But James came not with papers, but with a willingness to show force. James did not divide the core, but combined several cores into a single magic circle. The masters are amazed by the level of the young man's training. Only 4 years of training, but the results are amazing. But mana management alone is not enough for perfection. Understanding magic is the main thing. James raised his hand, the air swirling. Wordlessly, he moved smoothly from one spell to the next. This is only possible with a deep understanding of magic. The masters ask him to use the sword and magic at the same time. He draws his sword without destroying the magic circle. The aura and the spell work in sync, without any failures. The core serves as the basis for the entire construction of magic. The masters exchange glances, clearly impressed by what they have seen. They ask for time to discuss among themselves. James calmly leaves the room. The masters gathered to discuss James's demonstration. The master of the Red Tower claims that James studied without a mentor. He studied all the records and trained on his own. The masters doubt. Theory is not equal to practice. The Laneharts are renowned for their innate abilities. James's magic has surpassed the first level. The purity of the performance amazed even the most strict magicians. His unity with mana caused admiration. Some suggest that it is capable of resisting a 4th-level circle. The masters offer observation and gradual training. The proposal to transfer him to the care of the Red Tower is approved. Access to the library will be provided later. The solution is seen as an investment in the future of magic, young but endowed with limitless potential. Relations with the Laneharts are strategically important, but James is not the natural heir. He will not become the Patriarch. Yod Lanehart is considered the rightful heir, but his position is weakening. The future Patriarch will be one of the twins, a boy named Cian. James should not be underestimated. He has firmly established himself in the family. The time will come when he will create his own branch of the family. The Laneharts leave the family nest sooner or later. When he leaves, Arot will invite him again. He will gain experience and remember who supported his path. He will be a reliable ally for all of Arot. At the blood ceremony, he surpassed everyone several times over. Even the Laneharts recognized him as a future great mage. Who knows, maybe he will become the next Arthur the Great. Some consider such praise excessive. Master of Darkness Balzac humorously counters the suspicions. He assures that he speaks for himself, not on behalf of Helmuta. The discussion dragged on and no decision was made. Doubts prevented us from reaching a consensus. It was suggested that we hold a vote right now. James was probably tired of waiting outside the door. It's time to accept the verdict and move on. The Master of the White Tower is the first to speak. He votes to accept James into Acreon. The Royal Library of Acreon is steeped in magical history, containing texts from the great mages of the past. Each floor breathes knowledge of ancient times, more of a museum than just a library. Sandy's writings are located from the 12th to the 15th floor. These works contain the power of magic and the trace of geniuses. Suddenly, someone calls out to James from behind. The White Tower is famous for its mistress, Melkith Elahia, the greatest summoner of the age. She made a pact with 2 spirit kings, Even outside of summoning, her magic is considered brilliant. The discussion is over. The decision has been made. A unified opinion could not be reached. A vote was held among the masters. 5 masters agreed to enter Acreon. 2 opposed, 1 abstained from making a decision. The majority of votes were in favor of James. He was given permission to go up to the upper floors. He was not interested in finding out who voted for. Melkite Elihiah expressed a neutral opinion. She did not object, but did not want to participate in the debate. The masters' faces remained gloomy and irritated. Although the decision had been made, they were still arguing. The master of the Blue Tower shook his head in agreement. He looked displeased when James entered. He may have been against it at first, but he changed his mind. James declined to discuss who voted against. The Green Tower Master and the Guild Master were against it. James repeated again that he didn't care. His indifference surprised Elihiah. She expected more emotion from a 17-year-old boy. She was surprised that James was not angry at the refusal, but James remained calm and focused. James decided to leave since he had received approval. Elihiah stopped him, noticing the sword on his belt. It was Buria's sword, blessed by the wind. She dreamed of making a contract with this spirit. I called him many times, but to no avail. Even the Thunder and Earth Kings refused to help, saying that the wind would not contact humans. Elihiah wrote to Leonhard asking to borrow the sword. There was no answer. They assumed she wanted to steal it. The sword belonged to the Lionheart family. James only wears it with the Patriarch's permission. She promised that no one would know. She asked to get the magic thing and trust Sister. The process would take no more than 1 day. You can watch everything if you want. He thought about the Wind Spirit King. He hadn't appeared in 4 years. Without enough mana, it will not be possible to summon him. Only the White Tower can help using the sword. It was not profitable to agree to this now. She was in his hands. James decided to squeeze the maximum out of the situation. He learned that ancient familiars lived here. They served the great magicians and founders of Arat. To the king of magicians who founded Arat, the battle mage, the father of battle magic, and also the great Sendi. James was bored. He was reminded of Sandy. They remembered the tour of the mansion on the day of their arrival. They mentioned meeting a relative at Murdane Square. Information about him quickly spread throughout the city. Everyone was talking about him. He became famous. The interlocutor looked at him irritably. She wanted to get the sword, but was refused. The interlocutor tried to evoke emotions in him. She joked about fear and unpreparedness. She hinted at the power of magic on the upper floors. He remained unperturbed. The interlocutor smiled and wished him luck. The elevator doors slowly closed. The ride began. The voice echoed throughout the hall, welcoming James Lionheart. He recognized her. It was Sandy. The girl was half his height. She shook her head. He knew it wasn't Sandy. In front of him stood the familiar in charge of Sandy's hall. Her appearance was an exact copy of the legendary sorceress. She knew his name. Acreon's system recorded every visitor. All familiars in the building were connected to the magical network. He was surprised by her name, Mer. The name was short for the surname Murdine. Sandy named the familiar after herself, bestowing both its name and appearance. No other familiar had ever received such an honor. On other floors, familiars didn't look human. She was an exception. Sandy, Arthur's great companion, contributed part of her personality to the creation of Mirror. He remembered how Riberian had mentioned the ban on the creation of living beings. Mare calmly replied, "She is not a living being. She has no soul, unlike real living forms. Her body is a completely magical construct created by Madame Sandy." Mare's consciousness was not in the body, but inside a crystalline sphere, indicating a magical construct. The familiar explains with a grin, "Madame Sandy's life's work. The Witch's Writ. Magical writings are divided into 3 levels. Sandy completed her writing before disappearing." James frowned. The design didn't look like a scroll at all. The familiar crosses his arms, a mocking tone in his voice. "This is not text. It is a form beyond your understanding. Even the masters of the magic towers could not comprehend it." The familiar's smile is full of pride and superiority. She inherited the young Sandy. The real Sandy had changed. No more emotions, just exploration. "It's hard to believe." He points to the sphere, demanding an explanation. The familiar answers without hesitation. The familiar's consciousness is part of the witch's scripture. Spells shape the personality. She has ruled the hall for 200 years. He remembers Roberiano's words. Sandy's higher scripture was above all the magic he knew. James asks about Sandy's disappearance. No one knows where she went. Students, kings, tower leaders, everyone asked. Mare did not believe. The magicians invaded the witch's scripture. They tried to extract her memories. Their skills were not enough. They come again and again. Some seek Sandy, but others are not driven by respect but by greed. The material for experiments was right in front of them. Almost no one could restrain themselves. James wondered why only the higher witch scripture was kept in Acreon, while the middle and lower parts were missing. The familiar explained that the middle and lower scriptures had been removed by Madame Sandy, and only the original remained in the library. Mare noted that the Leonhard family usually only worshipped Arthur the Great, but not James. Madame Sandy did not meet with the Leonhard family after returning to Aurat. After returning from Helmut, Arthur changed and stopped communicating even with close friends. Sandy's meeting with Annie and Tommy only took place at Arthur's funeral. The familiar told what Madame Sandy said about her companions. She called Tommy a moron. Annie compared herself to a snake. She spoke much more harshly about Harry, showing pain and suffering, but she did not mention anything about Arthur. Madame Sandy neither praised nor condemned Arthur, made no promises nor called him names. She simply remained silent. James noticed a portrait that was exactly the same as the one in the mansion. The smile in the portrait was false. Madame Sandy never smiled like that. When Mare adopted her character, she asked why they hung a portrait with that smile everywhere if Madame was always sad. The answer was that it is easier for people to see a smile across generations than a sad face. Mare never left Acreon, but she knew that there was a similar one hanging in the mansion. Only the artist had arbitrarily painted a smile. Madame Sandy didn't like it very much. Still, it was better than not seeing her at all. James wanted to sympathize with Mare on her loss, but Mare reminded that she lived 200 years and does not want to be perceived as a child. In Sandy's hall, in addition to the witch's writings, the magical equipment she used is stored. The staff, made of acacia, attracted special attention. This fabulous tree grows only in the great Samara forest, the homeland of the elves. Acacia is considered the most powerful magical tool in the world, made from the roots of a 1,000-year-old tree growing in the center of the forest. Elves believe that the tree contains the spirits of ancestors and maintains peace. To make the staff, the mighty elves cut off one of the roots and gave it to Madame Sandy. Despite being a human and not an elf or half-elf, Sandy had a close connection with the elves. Sandy never knew her parents. She was abandoned in the great forest of Samara, a jungle in the southern region of the continent. An elf passing by heard the crying and took the girl with her. So Sandy found herself in the kingdom of the elves. At first they didn't like her, but after learning about her incredible talent, they accepted her and taught her magic. Madame Sandy became the first owner of the acacia root staff. The staff had a red stone embedded in it, the heart of a dragon. There are only 2 dragon heart magic staves in the world, Madame Sandy's acacia and Bloody Mary. The owner of Bloody Mary is one of 3 dark wizards who made a contract with the demon king of imprisonment, Count Edmund Codret of Helmut. 300 years ago, Bloody Mary was possessed by a lich named Belial, a subordinate of the demonic king of the prison, and he killed Harry. The demons there were so strong that they could be compared to demon kings. 3 of them stood out for their special power: the dagger, the shield, and the staff of imprisonment. After Harry defeated the shield of imprisonment, he received a serious wound. A huge hole remained in his chest after the fight with Belial. Acacia does not recognize anyone but Madame Sandy as its owner. James took the staff, but it did not accept its mana despite seeing Sandy's image. James insisted that he was not infatuated with Sandy, he just liked old stories. Mare showed the book The Adventures of the Great Warrior Arthur, the book that first told the world the legend of the Great Arthur. The book, however, criticized Sir Harry's portrayal, which offended James. The book is an original published 300 years ago in Arust. The author is unknown. Harry constantly challenged Vermouth and challenged Arthur, but was defeated every time, crying in humiliation, James read. After reading a couple of lines, James assumed that the book was written by Annie, who was a pretty shrew. Mare suggested that there was something that James would like. He saw the full-length images of the book's heroes. Madame Sandy has drawn these images from her memory. They are not portraits, but real images of her comrades. The man in the middle is the great Arthur. A beautiful girl with a smile, Saint Annie. The one who looks like a troll but is human is Tommy Fearless. a gangster with a fight in his eyes, Harry the Reckless. Ironically, Harry is almost forgotten by history, and only in Sandy's Hall can his image be seen. Mur was infatuated with Arthur's beauty. James admitted that old Arthur was good, but Harry had the aura of a wild beast. James sat across from Mur at the table in Sandy's room. Madame Sandy's traces were on floors 12 through 14. He wanted to know what was stored on the last one. On the 13th floor are Madame Sandy's research records. There are also memories of her plans from the moment of Acreon's foundation. These records are impossible to understand without high preparation. There are also research books on the 14th floor. They contain explanations, so they are a little easier. Even so, their contents are also difficult to digest. Wouldn't it be better to choose them instead of the witch's scripture? It's impossible to explain in words. She suggested trying it yourself and understanding the difference. Witch's Writ is a method of optimizing mana in magic circles. With its help, the magician's magical power increases significantly. It describes the simplification of the radio efficiency technique. The process is achieved by eliminating the need to cast spells. The materialization of magic through the division of consciousness is described. Magic penetrates the body and is stored in it unconsciously. It can manifest itself in different ways depending on the situation. This is the ideal management of the magic circle. Although mages use circles these days, this one is superior to normal circles. It allows you to use maximum mana. To read the scriptures, you must close your eyes and stretch out your hand. Then you must enter your mana into the witch's scriptures. After that, the ability to read them opens up. You just need to pour your mana into it, but nothing has changed. When he found himself in the darkness, circles were visible below. It felt like a dream, but with noticeable differences. He couldn't move like in sleep paralysis. There were no hallucinations like in nightmares. There was a feeling of complete loss of strength. A sea of mana surrounded him. There were magic circles all around. There were a lot of them. He fell to the floor unconscious. Mare was standing next to him. Was he doing anything strange? He simply fainted. Many mages lost control after contact with the witch's scripture. James passed out foaming at the mouth and woke up 2 hours later. The mistress of the White Magic Tower, Melkith Eli Chaya, and the master of the Blue Magic Tower, Caritad Uzlan, both shit their pants. James realized that Melkith was speaking not out of mockery, but from experience. Mare asked what the experience of entering the witch's scripture was like. It was difficult, and he still doesn't understand it all. He feels like he vaguely understands it, but can't realize it through knowledge. He found it interesting to watch the mana circle move. Within the Great Circle were countless other circles, divided into different parts. James can only realize this after reaching 9 circles. Madame Sandy had 9 stars when she created the Circle of Magic method. She continued to explore magic and surpassed her own limits. The bottomless abyss is a stage of the Circle of Magic that only Madame Sandy has reached. After the witch's scripture appeared, many magicians wanted to reach this stage. However, no one was able to overcome the barrier of the 9th circle. If you can use the mana without losing a drop, the circle will split and start spinning. This is the perfect mana management. Although it is difficult to create a bottomless abyss, magic will become very easy to use. Even the fireball from the bottomless abyss is stronger than the hellfire of the 9th circle. All techniques with mana will become simple. After returning from Helmet, Sandy became much stronger. Even Annie, Tommy, and Arthur became stronger. Then why did they retreat? Jim went down to the lower floor, where he met Roberian and the mistress of the White Tower, who was surprised by his quick return. James admitted that with his current knowledge, it would take him many years to understand even one magic book. Everything in the room is the result of centuries of studying magic, and I realized how vast the volume of information is. Even a genius finds it difficult to master everything without mentorship and experience. Therefore, the mistress of the White Tower offered an exchange, a sword in exchange for help in studying the 10 magical books stored in Acreon. James noted that magic books were not the most valuable thing here and doubted whether he should agree. Maybe think of something more useful, perhaps an item to make the deal seem fair. James was offered a trade for a staff he doesn't have. The staff should make it easier to control mana and simplify the technique. Roberian had many good staves and was ready to lend a suitable one. Damn Goldilocks. Eli was angry. Roberian reminded about the contracts with the 2 spirit kings. He accused the head of the White Tower of greed. The fears that Eli might make a contract with the Wind Spirit King and start a rampage were justified. Eli rejected political games and refused to get involved with Orat and annoying things. Roberian warned that unexpected changes could be expected with renewed vigor. Eli swore on her manna that she would not change even if she made a new contract. Roberian believed her because she had made the decision herself and given the promise. Ellie considered Roberian a small snake. James thought about it and decided that he didn't need the staff. Eli wasn't going to give it to him, only lend it. The sword can be borrowed for a couple of days. In return, an artifact for several years is needed. Without this, there will be no contract with the Wind Spirit King. The exchange is tough, a year for 1 day, 7 years in a week. The desire to make a contract with the Wind Spirit King is very strong. To the summoners, he is the greatest of the Spirit Kings. He fought alongside Arthur the Great. Roberian spoke. Ellie interrupted him sharply, demanding that he be silent. Roberian tried to continue, but Ellie covered his mouth. The mistress of the White Magic Tower possessed a valuable artifact. Ellie screamed, trying to stop him. James listened carefully. The artifact was called the Cloak of Darkness. Ellie hadn't used it for about 10 years. She sacrificed a lot for it. Roberian offered to lend the cloak to those who needed it, rather than just keeping it. Ellie was confused and explained that the raincoat was ordinary warm clothing. Roberian specified that the cloak contains the highest level of time and space magic. It is similar to the Shield of Gaedon, which reflects enemy attacks. But attacks can only be reflected with precise coordinates and traces of mana on the enemy. The cloak is enchanted with protective magic of the fifth circle. The strength of the protection depends on the wearer's mana. The cloak contains subspace magic, useful for those who use different types of weapons. You can store equipment in the cloak and use it as needed. James decided to take the Cloak of Darkness instead of the staff. Ellie hesitated. It seemed the situation was more complicated than it seemed. James's head immediately began to ache with shock, and he felt hungry. He invited Sir Roberian to dine with him. He knew a great place in the rich area where the food was excellent. James remembered that he had never seen Arrett at night. He called for a carriage, preparing to leave. Ellie decided to borrow the Cloak of Darkness. He agrees, but not right away. First, James needs to go eat and talk to the Patriarch. The requests of poor magicians irritated him. Ellie screamed as if a crow had died. Glade didn't object to the exchange. He specified that when the ball is borrowed, the Leonhardt caretaker must be present, and the pass must be made by Melkit. The Cloak of Darkness looked cool, and James thought it would look even better on him. Spinagriz was shameless. He was glad that an agreement had been reached. The Patriarch was not the caretaker. The cloak was guarded by the Patriarch's brother and a detachment of guardians. This was the first time that the Leonhardt treasure had been borrowed. The guards are the loyal dogs of the Leonhardts. They were also called the Family Laws and the Black Lions of the Leonhardts. They have many names, but in essence their role was similar to that of dogs. They honor the laws of the family even more than gods. A year ago, Keon joined the Order of the Knights of the Black Lion. It was not surprising. If you have enough skills and passion for family ideology, the choice of path is limited. The Order of the Knights of the White Lion serves the main branch of the family. The Order of the Knights of the Black Lion serves all Leonhardts, and the Senate rules everything. Those who, regardless of branch, left their names in the history of Leonhardt. Even Patriarch Glade doesn't measure up to those old fools in the Senate. The Order of the Knights of the Black Lion never showed up to James during the 4 years they spent in the main residence. The Order is selected from the most loyal and distinguished Leonhardts. They are also commanded by the Senate itself. The carriage has arrived. Ellie considered what was happening to be a complete show. James believed that she respected Arthur the Great. There was respect, but not for the Leonhardt family. The family, which suppressed the side families, the Senate, consisting of old men, inspired only disgust. Eli shouldn't have shown her feelings towards them, if she really wanted to borrow the sword. Ellie considered her offer a fair exchange, and had no intention of currying favor with the Senate, despite their power. She emphasized the value of the Cloak of Darkness and the sword, reminding him that she was not giving them away forever. The carriage stops. James looks at Seal coming out in surprise. Seal is sad. James looks puzzled. There is a slight tension in the air. Cian was with her. They came to buy a birthday present for their mother, and at the same time to find out how he was doing. A spearman comes out behind her. Nasty magician, and hand-to-hand combat. James assesses their fighting poses. The woman of high status recognized Robrian and was surprised that he was the master of the Red Magic Tower. He had spoken about this a long time ago, but she didn't remember it. The woman introduced herself as Carmina Leonhard, James's great-aunt, although it is strictly forbidden to call her that. Sister of the Glade Patriarch's mother. Considering Melkith and Robrian's youth, he was not impressed by her appearance. He wondered why a magician of such level had come in person. They soon decided to continue their conversation inside, as it was chilly outside. The conference room is immersed in shadow. 7 figures sit around the table, all tense. Carmina Leonhard, a member of the Order of the Black Lion Knight, is currently the 3rd commander of this knightly order. Nathan Leonhard, vice-captain of the 3rd Legion, comes from a side-branch family. Palaga Leonhard, a mage of the 3rd Legion, belongs to the magical branch of the family. He is responsible for today's case. On the table lie the Vinite and the Cloak of Darkness. The glow of mana is barely noticeable. The contract is formulated. 1 day of sword ownership, 1 year of cloak rental. Palaga slowly passes the contract across the table. Destroying the sword equals losing a life. But life also has a meaning that cannot be measured in money. Maybe in Erot this is true, but not for the Leonhards. Carmen calls for an end to the argument and reminds everyone here are colleagues and allies. She expresses faith that the sword will remain intact because no one will take any risks. Carmina scornfully rejects concessions, reminding them that they owe nothing to anyone. Without the Patriarch's will, she would not have come at all. James suspected ulterior motives in her visit. Carmina admits that it's not just about the contract, her goal is much more serious. She mentions a meeting with Balzac Lutbit about Yoda, as well as the mage's interrogation in prison scheduled for the next hour. Roberian reminds Carmen of her promise to follow the laws of Erot and waits for an explanation. Carmina coldly says that the opinion of the Senate is more important than the order of the Patriarch. The incident has brought shame on the Leonhard name, and the culprit from the Tower of Darkness must pay. Annie's attention is drawn to the antique pocket watch in her hands. She notices the absurdity. The watch is heavy and uncomfortable, but she wears it. Her surprise grows. She is also wearing a wristwatch. Even more questions are raised by the cigar, which she doesn't even smoke. Carmina calmly says that she has received permission from the king and the Parliament of Erot. With such permission, the interrogation will proceed quickly. Everything was paid for. The sum was so large that Parliament could not refuse. The interrogation will be conducted according to its rules. It will take E&I at least 3 hours to activate the sword and conclude the contract. In the worst case, he expects to receive the cloak only in 2 months. E&I confidently agrees to the deal. Annie beams with joy. She now has the sword. James puts on the cloak and examines it. The design of the coat is impressive, especially the fur on the collar. The fur resembles a lion's mane. Carmen thinks white would be more appropriate. White is like the flame of the method, or the color of ashes. In this form, he looks like the Knight of the Black Lion. Seal points out Carmen's wish. James is surprised. Carmen didn't ask for anything. Carmina tries on the cloak and assesses the fit. She is satisfied. The style suits her. The Leonhard crest should be on the back. Ione reminds him that the cloak is just borrowed. Seal and James decide to spend time together. James asked me to tell Cian to get rid of the Catgirl books. He's afraid that Nina will start making ears part of her maid uniform. Seal finds this disgusting. She will pass this on to her mother. James wonders why he can't just hint. He suggests telling Cian that maid ears are not suitable. Seal asks what kind of ears James likes then. James is confused how the conversation got this far. Seal believes that his words imply that he has a preference. James prefers regular ears. He cuts off the conversation and suggests going for a gift, although he is perplexed. Why would he go for Lady Anasili's gift? He doesn't even know her. Ciel insists she knows her preferences. James objects. There's no point in him just hanging around. Ciel is angry. He wants her to wander around a strange place alone. James thinks of her as a smart, mature girl who can handle anything. Ciel is confident that James will still go with her. James agrees, since he has no choice. He adds that Ciel is too touchy. She remembers that he recently had a birthday. James did not celebrate it and refused gifts from Sir Robertian and Lady Hera. Ciel, out of jealousy, asks who Hera is. James explains that she is a mage from the Red Magic Tower. James suspects that Ciel has come for more than just a gift. He asks her to tell him what she really has in mind. Seal admits that she wants to convince Carmen to become her mentor. Her brother is following the path of the patriarch, and she does not want that. She doesn't want to become an ordinary lady from the main family. James understands that she wants to join the Order of the Knight of the Black Lion. He is glad that she is trying on her own and not depending on her family. Seal often mentions James. He wanted to know how many stars James had already reached. James still has 3 stars. Sienna still has 2. James wants to know Yod's fate. Seal heard that Yod returned home. Lady Tionis is looking for a mage to homeschool Yod. James finds this funny considering what Yoda did. Yod won't be a patriarch anyway, so why shouldn't he do what he likes? Saley suggests ending the conversation and going out for a bite to eat because she's hungry. She wants to know if there are any good restaurants nearby. James replies that there is, but it still tastes better at home. Saley says she doesn't care because it's not the food that matters, it's the atmosphere. She suddenly becomes embarrassed. In a prison cell, a dark magician lies without signs of life. All the executioner's hands are covered in blood, but he has not given anything away. Despite the torture he did not crack, it seems that he really did not know anything. It was strange that a low-ranking mage would dare to get involved with the main branch of the Leonhards. Perhaps he had forgotten what fear was, or was simply insane. He acted out of desperation. Gavitt had studied dark magic for decades, but had achieved nothing of significance. His soul would belong to the demons if he died without achieving his goal. Without the possibility of reincarnation, he decided to take extreme measures. He wanted to sell Yoda's soul to gain power and get out of trouble. Even putting himself in danger, he hoped to come out unscathed. Rumors have emerged that the Night Witch Noire Zabella has nothing to do with this. Carmen has doubts and wants to check with Balzac Ludbet. Balzac feels suspicious, although he claims that he has done everything for sincere cooperation. He doesn't understand why he is suspected and points to the pathetic mage as the true culprit. Suspicion shifts to him, but he counters that it is not to his advantage. He would have covered up all traces if he really was behind the incident. If it were Balzac, not a single relative would be able to get to the truth. Everything would be wiped clean. He states that he has many enemies, hinting at a more complex plot. He has received the blessing and trust of the Demon King. There are those in Hulmud who envy his position and want to set him up. He is sure that the enemies created the situation to cause misunderstanding. There is no evidence against him, but he also has no evidence of innocence. Balzac reminds us that not only he suffered because of this, but also the Leonhard family. Carmen warns to be careful with words. He claims that as a servant of the Demon King, he loves Leonhard just as much as His Majesty does. That is why he offered sincere apologies and was cooperative. But she may not be upset by the accusations against her. He is Balzac Ludbeth, the master of the Dark Magic Tower and the loyal servant of the Demon King of Imprisonment. He can accept a lack of respect, but he will not tolerate insults, especially when it concerns him and His Majesty. Carmen doesn't want to cause trouble in a foreign land. Balzac offers to fix the problem himself, and no one will notice. We need to resolve the issue of the contract between Incubus and Yod. She had seen many horrors, but this sight was especially vile. Balzac began the magic ritual, his face impassive. The magician's head was cut off without delay. The demonic king of imprisonment absorbed the souls of the slain. Balzac offered Carmen the head as a gift. She refused. Carmen kicked the villain's head with all the force she could muster. Blood splattered everywhere. They calmly informed him that they were going back. At parting, they warned him about the impossibility of approaching James. In case of contact with him, he will obey only the will of the king. He reminded that Lady Carmina cannot dictate to him. As they were leaving the place, Carmina asked Keon a question. He expressed suspicion towards Amelia Marvin. Envy of the Dark Tower's master could have driven her to do this. The Demon King of Imprisonment does not interfere in the disputes of his subordinates. His contractors are free to do as they please. If Amelia is involved, then Nahama is behind her. Nahama's behavior has long been questionable. He believes that war will break out in the coming years. First of all, Turret will be hit. Nahama has old scores to settle with Turret, and she will take advantage of this. Kilia will be forced to mobilize all its resources. Even the Leonhard forces will be called to the war. Carmina wondered if Amelia was really counting on the conflict developing, or if it was just an accident. Keon wondered if Carmina hadn't ignored Balzac's provocation. In that case, they would have fought and died. Yod has already been placed under surveillance, and the Knights of the Black Lion have set out for Tionis's residence. They won't kill him because he's from the main branch, but they won't forgive him for any new mistakes. The rest of his life will be spent under strict control. All his rights will be officially revoked. They say Tionis is looking for a magic teacher. If someone is behind this, they will try to contact. Yod loved magic, which was his undoing. The day of farewell arrived. Seal waved her hand and said goodbye. James and the others responded with gestures and words of farewell. Carmina looked at James with a slight grin. She asked him about joining the Order of the Knight of the Black Lion. The order has an opening for an assistant captain of the 2nd Division. Carmina suggested, recommending James right away. James thanked her politely but declined the offer. A look of discreet annoyance flashed across Carmen's face. The carriage disappeared into the distance. The mistress of the White Magic Tower has not yet announced any news. If the contract had been signed, she would have already been bragging about it. Apparently, unexpected complications arose when concluding the contract. Eni raised the Sword of the Winds. The damn Tempest was silent. She tried again to reach the spirit world. She gave up body magic in order to enhance her perception and be closer to the spirits. Even her naked body did not cause a reaction from the old spirit. Eni called out to the King of Hurricanes, hoping for an answer. But instead, lightning appeared, and Lucite, the king of the lightning spirits, appeared. He claimed that Tempest had asked him to tell her to shut up. So Tempest had heard her pleas, but he ignored them. Milkit couldn't calm down. Her cries became more and more desperate. Levkit irritably demanded that she get out of the summoning circle. Her behavior became hysterical and her voice trembled with tension. She couldn't give Tempest what he truly wanted. The Lord of the Winds turned his gaze to the north, to the unconquered realm of demons. His aspirations remain unchanged, even after 300 years. In 10 days, she became a grandmother and still didn't sign a contract. James wondered if the contract had been secured. It's only because of her generosity that she hasn't finished him off yet. James considers her an unclean demon. Tempest is terrible, but he still turned her down. In the library, her loud voice irritates everyone. James offers to reduce the debt from 10 to 9 years in exchange for the sword. With difficulty, but she agrees and says goodbye to the sword. James was reading a book. The hero Kamash, a giant of unimaginable size, a leader who lived for hundreds of years. 100 men against hundreds of giants, against absolute power. Numbers didn't matter when Arthur was on the field. The Knights of the Order of the Old Rose came. They wanted to fight alongside Arthur. But they couldn't even touch Kamash. Arthur didn't like crowds. There was only one who could fight by his side, one and only. Harry. Only the Holy Sword could penetrate Kamash's defense. The sword chose Arthur. That decided everything. Kamash's head rolls, but the giants do not retreat. The demon's power weakens. Human magic works again. Enter Sandy the Magnificent. James thinks Sandy wrote this book. Who else would praise themselves? The mayor protects his mistress. James is going to look at the witch's scripture again. Mer thinks he's a tyrant. After the departure of the Order of the Knight of the Black Lion, James spent the next 10 days almost entirely within Acreon. He understood that he was now unable to recreate the abyss within himself, which required at least the 9th circle and possibly even higher. The bottomless abyss is a great circle that includes many smaller circles that multiply infinitely. Such a circle can be rotated, destroyed, and restored by the power of one thought. All manipulations with mana are aimed at increasing the power. However, James spun the stars in a circle of white flame to create a substitute for the real circle. He hoped to add another circle made of stars. Harry's knowledge in his past life was only for low-level warriors. Harry refined and added to his technique through countless battles, and Sandy guided him, adjusting and improving it. He created his own method, developing a magic core and exploding mana, spreading explosive energy throughout the body. It was with this technique that Harry was able to cut off Reed's leg and arm. Now he is not afraid of the bottomless abyss, the great circle, inside which small circles are endlessly recreated, and now he is able to see the movement of mana in this abyss. He was confident that he could do it. James Leonhard could recreate the bottomless abyss using the white flame method. 2 years passed. James was 19 years old. James was writing his dissertation. James felt slightly hungry, but refused to interrupt his work on his dissertation for fear of losing concentration. Mayor tried to convince him to approach the research more gradually, since usually mages spend decades on such work. However, James was confident in his abilities and had no intention of slowing down, reminding Mer that he was no ordinary mage. She did not allow herself to be called little, despite the significant difference in age. Mera was upset that James was going to leave. He has been visiting her regularly for 2 years now, and he is the only one who does so consistently. Other magicians, although they saw the witch's scripture, were unable to understand it and ended up simply creating their own magical systems. James, however, was persistent in trying to unravel the mysteries of scripture every day. Mer offered the opportunity to become the successor to the Master of the Red Magic Tower, but James declined, not wanting the role. There was the option of the Court of Magi troops, where Captain Trample was eager to receive him. James did not like his friendliness. The prince liked him too. If he worked for the prince, his name would be honored for decades. James thanked her for her opinion, but replied that this was not his path. He would not be able to become a patriarch, and therefore she was surprised by his desire to return to the Leonhards. James noted that he didn't need a special reason to return home. Mera admitted that his success in recent years has amazed even her. In just 6 months of work on his dissertation, he was able to simplify other complex magical works and develop his own magic. James, in turn, emphasized that he was writing his dissertation exclusively for himself, to organize his ideas. He has no intention of sharing it with the academic association. No one else can use the white flame circle method. No understanding, no matter how deep, will help to repeat his path. It doesn't just replace the magic circle. It uses the stars as the basis of a new method. Roberian was stuck already at the first steps. Mana simply got out of control. James has reached the 4th star in the white flame method and has successfully integrated the bottomless abyss into his magic circle. This allowed a ring of 4 stars to form, with mana continuously exploding inside. The key element was the rotation of the flame ring itself, which prevented mana from leaking outside the circle. This was the basis of the white flame circle method. James had planned to recreate the full circle only after the 5th star, but an encounter with the witch's scripture changed his mind. He delved into his research, spending a lot of time on the 6th floor in the Hall of Space and on the 8th floor in the Hall of Intense Heat. It contained the works of the greatest fire mages, and the Hall of Space helped him master the magic of movement and warping, necessary for effective use of the Cloak of Darkness. These studies became the basis for combining the white flame method with elements of spatial and fire magic, which marked the beginning of its own version of the great magical system. Roberian became James's mentor, his tutor, actively participating in checking and editing his dissertation. He helped adapt the basic spells of circle magic to work with the circle of flame method, James's unique approach. James devoted all his time to his studies and spent the remaining hours in research and training under Roberian. He knew that Mera was upset about his decision to leave Arat. Mera says that she is not angry, because she has no right to interfere with him. If he wants to leave, let him just leave. She admits that she never wanted to leave, and even if she wanted to, she still couldn't leave this place. The years they spent together mean nothing, because she is not human and knows that people only do what they want. She has lived 200 years longer than he has and is accustomed to human behavior, but she still asks for at least a farewell. Mera explains that her character is based on a young Sandy, and therefore her emotions are too childish. James is sure that the real Sandy would have acted exactly like Mera, despite her doubts. Mera replies that he has never met her and knows everything only from a book with pictures from someone's imagination. James claims that he will complete his dissertation by the end of the summer if he doesn't rush the rest of it too much. He promises that he will definitely visit her before leaving, and that he has something he must tell her. Mera suspects that he is simply going to laugh at her and threatens to kill him if it turns out to be a joke. He replies that he will tell her everything when the right time comes, leaving her waiting and wondering. Captain Trample approaches James again, offering to discuss everything directly without unnecessary ceremony and formalities. He reminds her of the vacancy in the Court of Magi and says that she is still waiting for a suitable candidate. James calmly refuses him again. The captain is interested in the progress of the dissertation and offers his help as an experienced magician. James reminds that the captain doesn't even know the topic of his dissertation because it is kept secret. The captain asks permission to simply look at the text, saying that he is in no way inferior to other mentors. James politely declines, feeling that it would be disrespectful to Roberian. The captain says they could keep it a secret, but James remains adamant. Things would get worse if he found out that the bottomless abyss had already formed in its own magic circle. This psycho is even capable of getting into bed for knowledge, completely ignoring the norms of morality and decency. The white flame circle method is outwardly almost no different from the usual white flame method. The ability to hide one's powers from a mage of such level is already an achievement worthy of praise. Roberian insisted that James would have surpassed the fifth circle long ago, but in fact, the fourth is now the limit. The bottomless abyss won't support advanced magic, even if James is theoretically ready for the next level. Is there really a lack of understanding? Although perhaps the reason is the limit of containment. I haven't yet perfectly recreated the bottomless abyss through the white flame circle method, so there is a weak spot. The James circle is replaced by 4 white flame method stars and 4 cores rotating simultaneously. The number of nuclei directly corresponds to the number of circles. As you move up a star, the circle also becomes stronger. Roberian asked to be careful because while the method has no drawbacks, the risks can accumulate. Too rapid an increase in an unknown method can lead to unpredictable consequences. The white flame circle method is different from the normal magic circle and allows the use of high-level magic. With its help, one can easily use magic up to the 5th circle, but touching the 6th circle is strictly forbidden. The dangers are fatal. After completing his dissertation, James plans not to return to Leonhard immediately, but to go on a trip. Ice crabs and Royal Luhar are little-known but desirable places to visit. The northern territories of the Kingdom of Luhar were founded by this monkey Tommy. After Luhar, we plan to head to Hama to try cactus scorpions, an unusual delicacy. Saint Ianai, revered by the Ura's Empire, went on a pilgrimage 200 years ago. Her last place of residence was the Hama Desert. It is surprising that culinary tourism was the reason for such a trip. So Robertian suggested trying lobster. The meeting with Prince Orota Hanim Abram was an unexpected event. The apology for the interruption during lunch was brief, and the conversation moved straight to the point of the proposal. If James remains in Arata, he is guaranteed the position of captain of the Court of Magi's troops, backed by the prince's oath. In 10 years, the prince will become the king of Arat. It is dangerous to talk about this publicly. The prince assures that the throne has already been promised to him, and the people of Arata believe in his succession. Although the Senate will require formalities to be observed, it is only a question of time and qualifications. James expresses gratitude, but claims that his current power is much greater than the prince thinks. The prince notices that both James and his mentor are hiding their abilities. James's entire body is saturated with mana, and his level indicates that he has reached the 5th circle. The prince guesses that James has solved the mystery of the witch's scripture and the bottomless abyss. When James is asked a direct question, he answers evasively, turning it into an answer in itself. His refusal is not based on hatred for Arata or the offered position. He simply doesn't want it. With such abilities, James can occupy a high position anywhere on the continent without much effort. The prince understands that power alone is not enough to keep him in Arata, so something more must be offered. He recalls that Sandy the Wise created 3 editions of the witch's scripture, one of which is kept in Acreon. The other 2, according to the prince, are in the treasury of the royal palace, as a symbol of friendship with Madame Sandy. James is surprised because he thought that the 2 editions had disappeared without a trace and had not ended up in the hands of the royal family. The prince clarifies that we are not talking about originals, but about copies given personally to Madame Sandy. He admits that even the royal family does not know where the original copies of the witch's book are. The prince offers to show James one of the editions kept in the palace, but cannot do so right now. When he becomes king, he promises to use his position to give James access to them. Such a step is impossible even for the master of the Red Magic Tower, and this makes the offer unique. The first volume, kept in Acreon, is in itself unique and has unimaginable value. He can't imagine how powerful the other editions are, if even the copies retain such power. But that's not enough. James is sure that there are traces of Sandy somewhere that have not yet been found. He admits that if this is not possible now, he will visit Arat after the prince's coronation. Then they can once again discuss access to the witch's scripture and continue their search for the truth. The prince notices that James is leaving himself an escape route by not giving a definitive answer. He agrees and says that he will send a letter as soon as his coronation is confirmed. James politely thanks the prince for his time and ends the conversation. Mare believes that the core and the bottomless abyss have merged almost perfectly, leaving only a little of the original incompleteness. She admits that she has nothing more to add, even if the result is inferior to Mendy's concrete abyss. The white flame circle method is much stronger and more effective than the classical circle magic system. Mare finds James's behavior a bit selfish, since he is the only one who can use this method. Even in its current form, the white flame method looks like a miracle, an incredible advancement for its level. Now that his dissertation is complete, James plans to leave Arat the day after tomorrow. The Red Magic Tower organizes a farewell party for him in his honor. Mare is jealous. James will eat delicious food and receive many congratulations. She reminds him of her promise several months ago that she wants to tell him something. James remembers, but Mare admits she needs to check something before she opens up. He offers to pass the message through someone else if he suddenly doesn't have time or can't do it himself. Mare blames James. He seems to suspect her that she might reveal his secrets. "Is there any reason to be suspicious?" James asked. The Masters had been pressuring her while he was gone. The Master of the Green Magic Towers had not given her peace even for a day. Even if someone tries to open the witch's scripture by force, nothing can be extracted from it. All data related to the study of the scriptures is stored deep in the magical vault of Acreon. This is a security measure designed to protect mages and their families from leaks and interference. Until the witch's scripture is completely destroyed, information cannot leave the confines of Acreon. If everything is so safe, then my words now will not leave the boundaries of our conversation. James confessed that he had reincarnated. He said that he remembered his past life. It's not even funny. Her gaze became empty, as if she had heard nonsense. In his past life, his name was Harry, he concluded, not looking away. Harry the Reckless, it sounds crazy, but it explains a lot. His words seemed stupid. But the more she thought about it, the more logical his behavior became. Realizing the bottomless abyss in just 2 years seemed impossible without taking into account the past life. He didn't just repeat someone else's magic, he felt its structure and adjusted it to suit himself. If he really is Harry the Reckless, then his talent no longer seems like a miracle. Harry was a man who didn't fit into any box, too weird and too brilliant. Sandy grew up in the elven forest and learned ancient magic in the shadow of their trees. Tommy was the son of a northern clan chieftain known for his madness and valor. Annie the Faithful was born among saints, her path marked by prophecies. Arthur, the great liberator, was a slave sacrificed but became a hero. He stole the demon's blade and, without knowing fear, killed those who were supposed to guard it. The first swing of Arthur's sword became legendary, destroying the guard of demons and dark magicians. He led slaves through dangerous lands, destroying hundreds of demons on the way to freedom. The stories about him seemed like fairy tales, but now it seems that there is truth in them. Harry was a true monster in battle, and unique among all the heroes. He had no noble birth or special abilities from birth. He took up the sword after the destruction of his village and became a mercenary filled with hatred for demons. In just a few years, he reached the level of legendary heroes, despite an ordinary beginning. If James is Harry reincarnated, that would explain his rapid growth. Harry in the books was hot-tempered and nasty, but he was unmatched in speed. James wanted to surpass Arthur and gave up magic for more familiar skills. He trained in sword, spear, and hand-to-hand combat to surpass Arthur. But he was unable to defeat Arthur despite all his efforts. Harry was a genius, but defeating Arthur was more important to him than recognition. When talking about his appearance, he acknowledged his popularity in the past, Mare recalled. He knew that he shouldn't expect help from Mare in finding the lady. In the 2 years they had known each other, he had sensed that Mare had Sandy-like traits. She had been created based on Madame Sandy's childhood. He admitted that he had crossed a line. Mare forgave him because Harry had been Sandy's friend in a past life. "Sandy is not dead. That is impossible. I am sure that Sandy did not leave this world without a will or a trace." He decided to find Sandy, leaving no doubt about her fate. In addition to Sandy, he looked for Tommy and Annie, believing that they were alive. He was determined to find all his friends and comrades. Sandy is an old fool who has neglected her familiar for centuries. He can swear his honesty to the witch's scriptures. James swore by blood and name that he was telling the truth before the witch's scriptures. The conversation is preserved in the secret part of the scriptures. No one in the world will know about it. Before Sandy disappeared, she told about the death of her friend, her spirit familiar. Mrs. Sandy fell down in pain and told about the break-in at Harry's grave. For the first time, he learned about his grave, which no one had spoken about before. After this, Sandy disappeared, and the conversation was hidden deep in the scriptures. James's body survived Beliar's curse, surprisingly for a lich. The curse usually destroys the body and soul, but his soul remained intact. His reincarnation was made possible by his preserved soul and body. There is speculation that Sandy could help preserve the body and soul. The connection between Sandy and reincarnation remains a mystery and raises questions. This fact changes the understanding of the nature of the lich's curse and Sandy's power. James walked along the night street, illuminated by flickering lanterns. He thought about the grave Sandy had created and its possible location. Memorial sites for the deceased are usually marked, but here there is nothing to indicate the location. Perhaps the grave is located in James's homeland, where he first appeared. Suddenly, the master of the Dark Tower called out to James, causing him irritation and mixed feelings. He knew about James's upcoming journey to Luhar and Hama, and he expressed concerns about the proximity of northern Luhar to the dangerous Helmud. The Luhar royal family recently changed their policy to allow demons to enter. There are many demons in Helmuda, some of which are not under the control of the Demon King. It turned out that Helmud had not just one Demon King, but several. The King of Imprisonment is inactive, the King of Destruction is silent, but among the demons there are those who are irritated by the centuries-old peace. Some demons do not want peace and are willing to disturb the peace for their own purposes. Many demons dream of causing chaos despite the rules of kings. The danger comes from those who do not submit to demonic authorities. James should be careful because demons can attack even during times of peace. The demons under the King of Destruction are also dangerous and may want to break the silence of their ruler. There are demons with great power who seek to take the vacant seats of the demon kings. Duchess Zabella wants to become one of the new demon kings. Demons will not vote peacefully. They can destroy polling places. The Queen of the Night Witches, Noir Zabella, has great power. Until there is certainty of victory, one cannot hope to succeed against her. James decided to visit Nahum first and Luhar later. You have to be careful in the desert. Not only the storms are dangerous, but also Amelia Mervyn. Amelia was a powerful dark mage even before her contract with the Demon King of the Imprisonment. The King of Imprisonment gives freedom to his subordinates, but especially to Amelia. If you meet Amelia Mervyn, give her this envelope. No matter what you do, she will not harm you. James opened the envelope. It was empty, but what was important was not the contents, but the fact that it existed. This letter is written by me personally. It will protect you from Amelia Mervyn. I won't be able to predict all the threats on Hama, but I can predict Amelia's character. Doubts. It would be strange if you suddenly stopped suspecting dark magicians. Balzac insisted that he just wanted to be friends like everyone else. James appreciated the help, and it would have been a good idea to invite Balzac to the farewell ceremony. He issued an official warning not to come with his gay tricks because the help was too persistent. Balzac promised not to show up. James thanked him for his understanding. He impressed him with his wisdom. The farewell party was in full swing. The masters of the other magic towers other than Blue were not invited, and this decision by James was deliberate. Roberian might not have liked the presence of dark forces. The master of the Dark Tower did not come as promised. James wanted to know more about his past. Balzac was always shrouded in mystery. Even among his best students, his motives remained unclear. He studied together with the current master of the Blue Tower, and their strength in those years was considered almost equal. More than 10 years ago, Balzac was the main candidate for the post of head of the Blue Magic Tower. His magic was amazing, and few doubted his future as a great magician. But suddenly he left the tower and went to Helmut, explaining this by his desire for new knowledge. His departure opened the way for another student, who became the master of the Blue Tower only thanks to Balzac's departure. 10 years passed, and Balzac returned as a dark mage, linking himself to the Dark Magic Tower. He received the support of all the dark mages and became their new master, rewriting his destiny. A magician may be strong, but before the Demon King, even a genius remains only a man. Even the greatest magic cannot overcome the boundary that separates humans from demonic lords. They say you are heading to Nahama, a harsh and merciless land hidden in the sands. The desert is unforgiving, and even mages feel vulnerable under its scorching skies. If you do decide to go to Nahama, be careful who you are. You can't call yourself Leonhardt. Wise teachers give the same advice. Keep your origins a secret. The cape attracts a lot of attention, but its hidden magic makes it ideal for the desert heat. The magic of the cape adapts to the owner's feelings, maintaining a comfortable body temperature. The magic map given by Roberian is synchronized with the point of movement. Apparently, James is in the Nahama Desert among the dunes and dry wind. The plan was to find his grave by going to his hometown near the border of Tura. Over the past 300 years, the Nahama Desert has been quietly expanding, absorbing neighboring lands. The city of Hari, located on the border of Turat, is now completely hidden under layers of sand. Due to the disasters caused by the storms, people were forced to abandon the lands captured by the desert. The captured territories officially came under the control of Nahama, strengthening its borders. Apparently, the process of expansion of the desert was provoked by the actions of sand mages. 300 years ago, the Demon Kings unleashed chaos by releasing demons and maddened monsters. Nahama took advantage of the turmoil and attempted to invade the borders of the Kel Empire. The invasion attempt ended in failure when Arthur the Great personally stopped their army. In my past life, I hated this country, and my opinion has not changed in 300 years. But before moving on, you need to find your grave. Sandy, Annie, Tommy, they can wait a little longer. I will find you all, wherever you hide in this world. James Lenhart returned to finish what he started.